Hello all of you beautiful people, Jules here for WhatCulture.com. But before we begin today's Sermon on the Mount, a quick history lesson for you all. Now, despite what video game publishers will gladly insist on nowadays, there was actually a time within the industry where titles actually contained content separate from the main experience that you didn't have to pay for. Now, I know it seems like an absolutely bizarre concept in this current landscape to not have to pay for the extras like skins, weapons, and even entire modes, but that was most definitely the case, with developers offering out extra content with the only proviso being that sometimes you might have to work for it. However, these primordial days of gaming were the equivalent of the Wild West, as the types of content that you could actually unlock often veered into the bizarre and downright insane at points, especially when it came to characters that you could crack open and play as. Because as you filled the roster of certain titles, you'd feel like that age-old expression was just bursting forth from your lips, as some of the unlockables that we'll be talking about today can really only be summed up with one single word, and that is what? So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 ridiculous video game unlockables that made you say, what? Number 8, a donkey in a glass box. Top Gear Overdrive. When it came to Top Gear, things were not done by half measures, and whatever you think of the main host's saggy meat blimp man, the one your mum fancies man, or lol old man go slow man, there's no doubt that when it came to coming up with insane and over-the-top challenges, things definitely were kicked into overdrive, which is an exceptional segue, if I do say so myself, into this next topic, because the video game of the same name that tied into the long-running British series was also packed to bursting with ludicrous content. Outside of the main selection of cars and tracks, the N64 version hid a plethora of petrol-headed hilarity, such as the Mobile Taco, an N64 logo on wheels, and my personal favourite racer ever, Donkey in a glass box on wheels. Now, scientists have long argued about the meaning of this menagerie of items, with some positing that it's actually a satirical jab at the Pope and his glass-housed vehicles, with the religious leader being made to look as an ass in this case, while others have claimed it to be a long-lost love letter to Team 17's concrete donkey weapon from Worms, and others, like myself, just see it as a prime source of what? Number 7. Tofu, Resident Evil 2. One of the best things about Capcom's approach to Resident Evil is that they've always come to the series with full awareness of the B-movie vibe that it was giving off. Whether it's the terrible voiceovers from the original or the tongue-in-cheek werewolves versus zombies carnival ride that was Village, it's a franchise that is not afraid to balance horror with humor. And that can be best felt in the unlockables for Resident Evil 2. Now, when players finally make their way through the base experience, their heart might well be set to permanent cardiac arrest, something that the 4th survivor mode only made worse, as now you have to guide Hunk out of a zombie-infested gauntlet. And if you're able to make it through this literal horror show, then you'll be met with another unlockable mode that might see your jaw hit the floor. The Tofu survivor is the same run as prior, but now you're in control of a sentient block of bean curd known as tofu, and armed only with a knife and some healing herbs to keep you in one piece. It's hilarious, it's genuinely challenging, and it's the moment that gave birth to one of the most iconic WTF characters in video game history. Number 6, Gex the Gecko, Hot Shots Golf 2. Now, golf is a rather strange game, isn't it? You get a bunch of people standing around in silence watching players wearing at once the most conservative clothes ever, but usually in the loudest colour choices, and then just watch them smack the piss out of a ball over the span of a field that could have been better used as a nature reserve over some tough country club. However, Hot Shots Golf 2 ups the ante somewhat when it comes to getting weird, as its unlockable characters are truly something else. In a game that's so cutesy and carefree and comes packaged with a soundtrack that would fit Harvest Moon better than a sports title, you could unlock a trio of ruffians that would definitely be denied entry to the driving range, let alone the main holes. Sir Dan from Medieval, Sweet Tooth from Twisted Metal, and the one and only Gex the Gecko have slid up to swing, and when placed alongside the regular sprites, they just look utterly bizarre. Thankfully for all involved, Gex doesn't dish out his terrible one-liners and focuses on putts over puns. But seeing him relax on his tail during his victory pose is just so utterly odd that it almost demands a double take. Number 5, Hornet, Fighters Mega Mix. Now, fighting games have seen their fair share of oddballs rocking up for a rumble, from mocap, a man with motion capture balls stuck all over him in Mortal Kombat, to a tiny T-Rex called Gon in Tekken, all the way to Fred Durst attempting to break all of your stuff, and by stuff I mean bones, in Fight Club. You can find all sorts of strange strikers just from a glance. Yet for me, there will always be one king of the "are you kidding" combatants, and that is Hornet from the outstandingly balmy Fighters Megamix. This title aimed at bringing tons of Sega's IPs together for one grand tournament, and at no point it seems did the issue of "but this character is actually a car" seem to bother the developers, as Hornet is quite literally that, a fighting car. Fighters Megamix has a playable fighting car. Just watching its janky punches, its weird arched back, and its clipping low attacks is enough to make you think that you've accidentally taken your nan's daily meds, but this is very real and very much a case of pure and utter what? Number 4. The Burger King. Fight Night Round 3. Now, many look back at EA's run with the Fight Night series as some of the best boxing games ever made, with their liquid smooth gameplay, truly impressive visual flair, and of course, the outstanding use of the analog sticks to control punches as you threw them, making it hard not to pine for their return, or at least a remake for the modern era. For me personally, Fight Night Round 3 is the most deserving of any potential remake, but maybe if the team were to choose this title, they might do us all a favour and take out one of the most horrific secret and unlockable characters in the game. I'm speaking, of course, about the Burger King. Yes, the actual massive-headed mascot could be unlocked to guide your fighter to the ring as a manager. I don't know why this image feels so cursed, but it most definitely is not something that I want in higher resolution. Maybe it's the dead eyes of the headpiece, maybe it's the fact that he's so happy that two fighters are about to potentially destroy each other, or maybe there's an air of class division with the king making peasants fight for his amusement. Either way, ban this sick filth. Or at least let me fight him so I can knock his ruddy block off. Number 3. Barney the Dinosaur. Xenophage Alien Bloodsport. Okay, so let's be blunt here. There's a reason that Xenophage Alien Bloodsport is not held aloft in the gaming pantheon of fighting titles, and that's because this DOS title moves about as quickly as erosion, is as stiff as porno acting, take that as you will, and feels about as deep as a puddle of piss. Incidentally, it's about as fun to play with as well. However, before you write this title off as just another wastrel wandering the gaming wasteland, there is one soul-redeeming feature hidden within this title, and that's the fact that you can unlock and play as Barney the Bloody Dinosaur. Now, to be clear, this is very much a knockoff fairground toy version of the beloved children's TV character, but with that colouring, that goofy smile, and of course that ridiculous heart attack that he shoots out, who else could it be? Making matters even more insane is the fact that as a combatant, he's actually ridiculously good, able to spam ranged attacks with devastating effect, quite possibly defeating his foes with the power of love itself. Well, love and a few solid slaps to the chops. Number 2. Colonel Sanders, Phantasy Star Portable. When it comes to video games, corporate tie-ins and sponsorship events are becoming more and more commonplace, each trying to get you to consume and play in equal measure. From Doritos shacking up with Call of Duty, to Final Fantasy 15 bending over backwards for cup noodles, to Death Stranding inferring that Monster Energy drink will definitely give you weaponized piss, it seems that video games and food tie-ins will always be slightly off-kilter. However, these are nothing compared to how hard Phantasy Star Portable went to bat for KFC as the one and only Colonel Sanders appears in cameo form in all of the Portable series titles. Hidden in each game, players can find the Colonel and purchase tie-in weapons and gear all based around his beloved fast food. And if that wasn't enough, speaking to him in some games unlocks his player card, allowing you to summon him to battle. That's right, you can summon Colonel Bloody Sanders to knock 11 herbs and spices off of your opponents in battle. That sentence alone feels like I've slipped into a chicken gravy-based fever dream. And number 1, a stained glass window, WCW/NWO Thunder. In the wrestling world, weird and wonderful gimmicks are the lunch menu special. Nearly every talent that walks through those curtains carries with them a distilled expression of themselves or some wacky persona designed to elicit boos and cheers from the crowd. We've had mask-bound demons, bodybuilding Viking warriors, and even a group that pretends to be soldier ants in Chikara wrestling. Yet even these oddities are but regular old normies to the developers of WCW/NWO Thunder, as they must have been sniffing the good stuff when rounding out their roster, because in short, it's utterly insane. So let's start easy and check what we have here. Well, let's begin with the announce team stepping between the ropes, making for some pretty odd matchups where the likes of Scott Hall can end up dominating those calling the action. Next up on this buffet of the bazaar are the numerous staff member inserts, meaning that you can quite literally fill a battle royale just with developers. However, the truly offbeat unlocks, which the game titles as Wackies, include a gorilla, a mantis, a werewolf, and my all-time favourite character that nobody could have seen coming, Tiffany Payne, who is a legit stained glass window come to life. That's right, a stained glass window that you can use in a wrestling video game. Need I say more?
It's easy to forget how much thought is put into making a video game. Whether it's the graphics or a key mechanic, every idea is discussed, tested, and revised rigorously. If a certain aspect isn't working, there are plenty of developers who will do all they can to fix it. Even if a core mechanic or a plot twist doesn't work, you can usually see what the creators were trying to accomplish. Then again, there are some moments in video games that are so weird or stupid, you can't really understand how that many people decided to go ahead with them. Look, we can all accept the odd screw up here and there. Even the best companies produce trash every once in a while. But while looking at these awful designs, atrocious mechanics, and failed reboots, you can't help but wonder what the developers were thinking. I'm Jess from What Culture, and here are 10 video games that made you say, what were they thinking? Number 10. A Sega trying to get sued. Revenge of Shinobi. Due to its diverse gameplay, impressive level design, and catchy music, Revenge of Shinobi is regarded as one of the best platformers of its time. However, gamers should also remember that Revenge of Shinobi was stuffed to the gills with so many copywritten characters, it's like Sega were trying to get sued. Nothing seems out of the ordinary at first, since the first few levels are populated by ninja enemies, but as you progress, you'll notice all the gun-toting goons look suspiciously like Rambo. Just when you thought you were imagining things, you fight a boss in a junkyard who's clearly meant to be the Hulk. When he dies, he suddenly transforms into the Terminator. Soon after, you'll find yourself battling Spider-Man and Batman. In the penultimate level, you'll also come face to face with the king of the monsters himself, Godzilla. Considering how protective Toho is of the Godzilla property, it's bewildering why Sega thought they could get away with such blatant copyright infringement. Unsurprisingly, the company were forced to change these characters' appearances in later versions of the game. Number 9. What's with that face? Seaman. When Vivarium announced they were releasing a fishing simulator that was controlled via voice commands, it sounded like it was doomed from the outset. Not only did it seem like a pretty uninteresting concept, voice commands have always been, and still are, a difficult mechanic to produce effectively in video games. To the surprise of everyone, Vivarium's work Seaman was an utter triumph. The microphone wasn't perfect, but the voice command system was more accurate than almost any other game at the time. Despite Seaman's simple presentation, gamers spent hours teaching language to their fish and building a rapport with him. All in all, Seaman turned out better than anybody could have hoped. Seaman's success is extra surprising considering how absolutely terrifying the titular character looks. I mean, I understand the developers need to give Seaman a distinct appearance to stand out, but why did they settle on fish with a realistic human face? Why not make him look cute, or conventionally marketable, or just anything other than what they decided upon? Even though Seaman sold pretty well, it would have done better if the studio gave the lead character a more appealing design. Number 8. 5 bosses in a row. Viewtiful Joe. Viewtiful Joe was a criminally underrated beat-em-up for the GameCube. Due to its beautiful cel-shaded graphics, film-oriented mechanics, and cheeky humor, this side-scroller has become one of Capcom's most beloved series. But no matter how much you adore Viewtiful Joe, nobody can defend the magnificent 5 level. In this section, you have to refight the previous 4 bosses before facing a new foe called Fire Leo. Now, since you've tangled with this lot before, you'll be well acquainted with their strategies. Since you should be equipped with plenty of upgrades, you'll assume this boss rush will be a walk in the park. Here's the problem, there are no save points in this level, so if any member of the quintet takes you out, you'll have to start again from the beginning. Even if you reach Fire Leo, you'll probably have no lives, meaning you'll only have one shot at beating him. But because this infernal lion is so fast and strong, it's likely he'll defeat you before you figure out how to hit him. Capcom received so much criticism for this oversight, they took it on board for the sequel, allowing the player to save in between each bout during the obligatory boss rush section.
Hello and welcome to the hardest gaming themes quiz ever.
Oh man.
Josh.
Fortnite.
Oh, Sly Raccoon.
Sonic Hedgehog. Johnston.
Oh,
Tetris.
Number 7. Trying too hard to reboot. DMC. The hardest thing about creating a cool character is making their appealing demeanor seem effortless. A person never comes across as badass if they're trying to look like one. By this logic, Devil May Cry's Dante really shouldn't work because he always seems like he's trying very hard to be cool. Because we see him shooting pool with demons, fighting the forces of evil with a guitar, and surfing on missiles, this demon hunter could come across as a parody. But Dante gets away with it because he's in on the joke. If he took his campy antics seriously, it would be far more cringy. Sadly, that's what the studio did when they decided to reboot the franchise. In DMC Devil May Cry, our lead trades his cocksure bravado for whiny angst. Now you have to commend Ninja Theory for attempting to reinvent the series. Dante's too cool for school shtick was getting a little bit tiresome, so it was understandable why the developers wanted to shake things up. However, Dante's newfound apathy just doesn't gel very well with Devil May Cry's over-the-top world. It would be like remaking Super Mario with the same cartoony aesthetic, but tweaking the Italian plumber into an intrinsically complex tragic figure. Even if it was a compelling character, it would still jar with the setting. Fortunately, the developers learned the error of their ways, bringing back the original Dante for the follow-up. Number 6. You missed the pistol? Too bad. Scorn. As you admire your surroundings while playing Scorn, it's easy to see that an astounding level of care was put into this game to emulate the biopunk designs of visual artists like H.R. Geiger. Unfortunately, many would argue Ebb Software should have spent less time on the game's techno-organic design and more on, well, the game itself. Due to its unbalanced puzzles and repetitive gameplay, it's no wonder that Scorn received some mediocre reviews. What makes Scorn's flaws so frustrating is how easily they could have been remedied. In a puzzle area with spherical elevators, you'll see a weapon rack that contains a pistol. At least, you should notice the rack. Because the pistol is easy to miss and off to the side while you're solving something else, many players fail to pick it up, making enemy encounters much harder for sizable portions of the game. Also, since checkpoints are minimal, expect to go back through the same sections ad nauseum. For the record, this is not a niche problem. So many players miss the pistol, there are entire forum threads dedicated to it. If the developer made sure the pistol was out in the open, this could have been effortlessly avoided. Number 5. Dragons and Zombies. True Crime Streets of LA. Based on the title, True Crime Streets of LA, you'd expect this game to be grounded in reality. For the most part, that's what you get, since Activision's open world game is a by-the-numbers police story. But between the car chases and encounters with the Russian mafia, True Crime takes a bit of a weird turn. While investigating Chinatown, you'll suddenly be attacked by a zombie. This moment comes out of nowhere since there was no indication the plot had any supernatural elements. But it doesn't stop there. Before leaving Chinatown, you'll be confronted by a telekinetic, lava demons, and a literal dragon. What makes this section more bizarre is how it's never brought up again. When our hero returns to his supervisor, he never brings up that he received the information by facing an actual mythological monster. To understand how crazy this comes across, look at it this way. Do you remember that moment in LA Noire when you battle a flying saucer? You don't? Of course not! UFOs aren't in the game because incorporating sci-fi elements into a dead serious noir thriller would stop the player being immersed in the grounded story. Even though this goes without saying, the developers of True Crime saw no problem with stuffing these crazy concepts in an otherwise realistic game. Number 4. Bait and Switch. Far Cry 3. Due to Ubisoft's flawless marketing, players fell in love with Far Cry 3's Big Bad Vast before the game was even released. After we saw this psychopathic but charismatic pirate king paraded all around the trailers and promotional material, it seemed Vast was destined to become a gaming icon. To the surprise of everyone, Vast is only in Far Cry 3 for 20 minutes. Worse still, he's killed off in the second act, causing another character to serve as the final boss. Even though bait and switches happen all the time in gaming, this one really stung. If Ubisoft never intended Vast to be the player's arch nemesis, why was his image used so heavily to sell the game? I mean, he's the only character on the flipping box art for crying out loud. It would be like if Thanos died halfway through Avengers Endgame, causing his right-hand man Corvus Glaive to become the actual big bad. You don't remember Corvus Glaive? No? Well, that's how gamers felt while playing Far Cry 3 when they learned a bit character had been bumped up to the main antagonist at the last minute. Who's Corvus Glaive? Oh yeah, that guy. Number 3. Wait, that's the ending? Mass Effect 3. Saying the Mass Effect trilogy is great doesn't do it justice. The narrative is staggeringly multi-layered, the characters' relationships are methodically thorough, the way your choices link and affect each succeeding installment is astounding. Because so much thought was put into every detail, it made sense that fans just assumed BioWare would pour the most care and thought into the climax. Instead, Mass Effect 3 ended with the player given 3 choices, which would result in the same ending but with different light filters. Because Mass Effect always focused on the consequences of your actions, giving players 3 identical endings regardless of your choices didn't just come across as lazy, it felt like trolling. Due to the relentless outcry from the fanbase, BioWare then released the extended cut, which at least added a little to the padding of the disappointing ending. Despite the company's best efforts to appease gamers, the damage was clearly done. Many fans felt so betrayed by this non-ending they didn't bother checking out the follow-up, Mass Effect Andromeda. Although the initial trilogy is still regarded as an utter triumph overall, it's impossible to disassociate Mass Effect with its shoddy climax. Number 2. Desert Bus: Smoke and Mirrors. In 1995, Imagineering developed a Sega CD minigame collection called Smoke and Mirrors, presented by the acclaimed magic duo Penn and Teller. Sadly, the publisher went bust, preventing the game from ever being officially released. Instead of falling into obscurity, Smoke and Mirrors gained a cult following due to one particular minigame that doesn't sound like it could even be real. In the Desert Bus minigame, you must drive a bus from Tucson, Arizona to Las Vegas, Nevada. In real life, this trip would take 8 hours. In the game, it also takes 8 hours. Because there aren't any other vehicles, you have no obstacles, save to stay on the road. If you veer off course, you'll be towed back the way you came, in real time. There's no music and you can't pause. If you manage to reach your destination, you'll be rewarded 1 point before being asked to head back to Tucson. Despite Desert Bus sounding like some kind of parody game you'd see on like The Simpsons or South Park, it is indeed a legitimate product. Number 1. To Infinity and Beyond: Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. When a franchise makes the move to space, it feels like it's yelling how creatively bankrupt it's become. When Friday the 13th was out of ideas, the series went to space. The same thing happened with Hellraiser and Leprechaun. Although this stereotype has been a recurring gag for years, Activision didn't seem too worried when they decided they'd do the same with Call of Duty. Not only that, the trailer for Call of Duty Infinite Warfare proudly demonstrated how this installment would center around a war through the cosmos. Now, it's not like COD didn't have futuristic elements before. Because the previous installment, Black Ops 3, took place in 2065, players had already experienced sci-fi in the series. But when Infinite Warfare introduced laser-shooting robots in space, it seemed like the franchise had lost its way. The change of direction was in fact so reviled that the teaser video on YouTube became the second most hated video at the time. Learning their lesson, Activision went back to their roots for the follow-ups, focusing on more grounded storylines. However, they could have avoided this error in the first place by simply asking, which franchise improved once they made the jump to space?
Hello all of you beautiful people, Jules here for WhatCulture.com. And when it comes to video games, the real-life celebrity cameo is not exactly a new thing. From Michael Jackson heading up Moonwalker on the SNES to Peter Dinklage adding in absolutely none of his vocal charms to Destiny, a big name being attached to your video game is always going to draw eyes and hopefully cash from wallets. That being said though, sometimes things aren't as blatant as Guitar Hero teaming up with Metallica and are odd examples of real-life celebrities showing up seemingly out of nowhere in our favourite video games. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 secret video game celebrity cameos that made you say, what? Number 8. Fred Durst in Fight Club. I think it goes without saying, but Fight Club is a rather exceptional movie. It's once a film for lovers of violence while also being a critique of that exact mentality, showing us the danger of overt masculinity and how destructive violence can be on a physical and emotional level. Which makes the fighting video game tie-in all the more strange, as this is quite literally glorifying the things that the film set out to chastise. Yet things get even more ridiculous when you realise that alongside Abraham Lincoln, the one and only hardest man in the world in that cap, Fred Durst is an unlockable fighter. The sheer irony of a man who routinely stoked the fires of teenage frustration and anger showing up in a game based on a movie that shows how ridiculous this lifestyle is pretty much the peak of things. Plus, watching the supremely toned and acrobatic Durst move around like he's a martial arts master really does put the cherry on this WTF cake. The man looks as dangerous as a passive-aggressive post-it note in real life, but here, well boy howdy if this isn't Jax compensating for something. Number 7. Ariana Grande, Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. If there's one thing that you immediately think of when somebody brings up Final Fantasy in conversation, it's most likely going to be spiky-haired and even more emotionally spiky protagonists doing battle against mythical monsters and demons, right? It's probably not going to be pop stars Ariana Grande and Katy Perry, right? Well, thanks to some celebrity shenanigans, the two musical artists are now forever embedded into the franchise thanks to both showing up as events tied to Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. It's a truly bizarre moment to see the pair alongside the likes of Cloud, Squall and Sephiroth, but such is the mad, mad world of celebrity culture. Out of the two of them, Ariana Grande was actually the more shocking because no one could have predicted the pop artist teaming up with Square Enix of all people. And to be honest, while it might not be the most immediate fit, the song released alongside to promote the event and the character of Dangerous Ariana was actually handled surprisingly well. And when you consider the pop leanings that Final Fantasy X2 took, maybe we should have all seen this coming all along. Number 6. Ricky Gervais, Grand Theft Auto 4. The Grand Theft Auto series is no stranger to celebrity cameos, with a monstrous amount of rap artists rocking up to provide vocals for San Andreas, Samuel L. Jackson heading up Officer Tenpenny, and even Phil Collins dropping in for a spot of tea and trouble within Vice City Stories. Still, as shocking as all of these moments were, they were at least promoted somewhat before launch and felt connected to the world around them. The same cannot be said for the Ricky Gervais cameo in GTA 4, as not only were the comics cutting jibes hidden within the game itself, but absolutely zero mention was made that he'd done any work for them at all. It's one of those double take moments whenever you manage to catch one of his sets at the Split Sides Comedy Club, as you swear for a moment that it can't actually be him and is merely just a parody, but when he's introduced by name and is rendered like for like, you start reeling as to why such a cameo was hidden within Liberty City. There's a good chance that many players never even saw this stand-up set, thanks to the fact that the comedy club is never used in a mission and is never mentioned explicitly as an activity. Number 5. Conan O'Brien, Death Stranding. Now, to be honest, it would have been very easy to put every celebrity cameo in Death Stranding as the header for this entry because each of them carries with it a stamp of Hideo Kojima, which, in case you've been living under a rock, is a stamp made of writhing tentacles, question marks, and brick dust made from the fourth wall that he's just broken. Still, no image will boggle my mind more than seeing the one and only Conan O'Brien standing before me in a bloody otter hat, talking to me about the end of the world and how building human connections are the only way that society will thrive again. I feel like that sentence alone just doesn't make sense, even though I'm literally looking at the evidence of its own existence. To say this cameo was a shocking one is like saying that Death Stranding somewhat suggests that Monster Energy drink will weaponize your own piss, which is a bit of an understatement. It's a completely disarming moment and one that you simply could not have seen coming even if you knew that Conan was going to be in this game somewhere. Number 4. Gary Busey, Hitman. When you're a world-class assassin, killing high-profile targets is pretty much par for the course. Tyrannical dictators, business moguls, fashion designers, millionaires, and of course, Gary Busey? Yes, that's right. While the world over lost their minds at being able to kill Sean Bean in Hitman 2 and help perpetuate the gimmick that he has of dying over and over in his projects, the one and only Gary Busey showed up as an elusive target in the rebooted Hitman in 2016. Now, if I'm being honest, this cameo wasn't so much of a secret as some of the others on this list, as fans did actually get a chance to vote on who they wanted to hunt down next. Still, when it comes to sheer what factor, things reach a peak when you remember that you're trying to track down and murder Gary Bloody Busey. Dubbed the wild card, everything about this contract is played for laughs, with Busey being shown to be on location to sell a product called Never Ashamed, which is a male hygiene product, and then listing a series of superpowers that Busey has claimed to have had, and then having a little addendum saying debunked next to them. It's a brilliant sorbet experience that fits perfectly alongside the more serious approach of some of the other Hitman levels. Number 3. Lemmy in Scarface, The World Is Yours. There are very few things in life that you can say with certainty, but one of them is most assuredly that Motorhead kicks ass. And dare I say that there are very few of us in this world who haven't given ourselves neckache to the monstrous licks of Ace of Spades or Overkill. It's the brilliant combination of hard as your dad riffs and grimy and downright raspy vocals from frontman Lemmy Kilmister that push the band to the upper echelons of metal. In fact, you'd be hard-pressed not to recognize the distinct growl of Lemmy in whatever he plied his hands to. Yet that's what makes it all the more shocking that the legend actually snuck himself into a video game so well that for many, it completely flew under the radar. In Scarface, The World Is Yours, a game that acts like a what-if Scarface survived at the end of the movie scenario, you've now placed yourself right at the bottom of the food chain again. having lost all of your wealth, guns, and hired goons. Therefore, you're gonna have to slum it for a bit, taking on small jobs and working with some pretty shady individuals. And it turns out that one of the merchants that you can buy guns from is none other than Lemmy himself, making for a truly odd moment where you almost double take saying, wait, what? Was that Lemmy? Yes, it was, my friends, and yes, it was bloody cool. Number 2, Peter Serafinowicz. Dark Souls 2. Now, sometimes a celebrity cameo isn't something born out of a desire to make money, and instead it's a scenario created out of either the devs or the celebrity in question just being huge fans of one another. Case in point, the curious tale of mild-mannered Pate, who appears in Dark Souls 2. Now, for those who might not be super familiar with his work, Peter Serafinowicz is something of a British comedy icon, having appeared in Shaun of the Dead, numerous comedy TV shows, and even appearing in Guardians of the Galaxy. Yet apparently, in between these appearances, Big Pete here was putting in the shifts on the original Dark Souls. The actor reportedly clocked up 1,800 hours in the original game and, in his own words, banged on and on about the title on his Twitter to anyone who would listen. This caught the ear of Namco Bandai, who eventually reached out and rewarded his massive fanboy antics with an offer, and that was to voice a character in the Western localization of Dark Souls 2. Thus, Pete became Pate and offered his truly silky vocals to this shady character. Yet the true what moment is that this wasn't the only vocal lines that Serafinowicz offered, as it turns out that you were actually playing as him kind of the entire time. By this I mean that the actor provided all of the male grunt effects for the custom character, meaning that when you were getting hit, you were secretly witnessing a cameo of this comedy giant. And number 1, Drew Carey, The Sims. Now, while the name might not hold as much weight as it did in the late 90s, especially seeing as his last movie appearance was on the absolute dead dog in a bag Jack and Jill film in 2011, Drew Carey is still a fondly remembered comic and TV host. Thanks to his incredible popularity, Drew was drawing in huge amounts of cash in the late 90s and early 2000s, reportedly getting $750,000 per episode of his self-titled comedy TV show. And as such, he loved to live the life, showing up at pretty much every celebrity gathering going. Yet, if you were playing the original Sims game, you wouldn't need to be a millionaire in order to draw Drew's attention, as if you had a party that went on for more than 2 in-game hours and held a high satisfaction rating, then there was a chance that Carey might actually show up for the shindig. It's an utterly bizarre moment to unlock a secret guest of this caliber, and it's hilariously bizarre to see Carey schmooze with your guest into the early hours. It's impossible not to love a good video game secret ending. Because these pieces of closing content aren't usually canon, it means the developers can have a bit more fun with these moments and explore situations that are sure to leave player bemused and confused in equal measure. In fact, if you boil all of these down to just one word, they would have to be what? So let's take a look at them today. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 secret video game endings that made you say, what? Number 8. Helios, Returnal. Now, Returnal might well be the David Lynch of video games, and I say that both as a huge fan of the game and of the legendary filmmaker's work, as both are divisive, invite a ton of further reading, and confront audiences with pretty difficult subject material. Arguably, Returnal is much more of an enjoyable ride than a Lynch project though, as at least here you get to blow off some of the frustrations by annihilating enemies with sci-fi weapons. But as much as you might try, the plot of Returnal keeps dragging you back down to the watery depths, and it's very possible to come out the other side of this game with little to no understanding of what transpired. And you know what, there's no shame in that, as it's told in a rather obtuse manner. However, if you really want to set your brain to absolute melted cheese, then try digesting this super secret ending. Gained by collecting hidden fragments and using the car key after defeating the final boss, you'll be treated to a series of events that will have subtext hounds tearing the seams of their trousers with excitement. Here you'll witness a pregnant alien-like creature, a point of view from an astronaut witnessing a car crash, a frantic swim to the surface, and finally a gasped Helios as we finally end the scene. From what internet super sleuths have gathered, this scene is meant to represent our main protagonist's cycle of grief for abandoning her son in a car accident to drown, and her repressed feelings manifesting as monstrous creatures. However, I can sum it up for you in one word. Just take a guess at what it is. That's right, it's what? Number 7. 101% completion. Jak and Daxter, The Precursor's Legacy. Now, I will always hold a soft spot for Jak and Daxter's first outing on the PS2, namely because it was one of the first games that I ever played on that console, and man did it feel like a huge step up from the prior generation. It also helped that the game was as polished and as smooth as my egg-shaped head, but what really pushed it over the line was the attention to detail when it came to characters, comedy, and devilishly tricky platforming segments. Therefore, of course, I was one of many who saw the game through to completion and indeed beyond, netting the 101% completion bonus by grabbing all 101 power cells and returning to a mysterious precursor door. With great anticipation at the secrets that I'd unlocked for all of my hard work, I gazed in wonder as all the cells began to power up and the great mechanism groaned into life. However, this moment quickly soured when all that was revealed was a blinding light and all of the characters looking on in amazement before then cutting to black. Oh, cool. So you just made me work my nuts off for a cheap sequel teaser, did you? A sequel teaser that they also begin Jak 2 with, so it's totally not worth your time at all, and you missed nothing by ignoring the collectathon from the original game. I'm sorry, what? Number 6. 1 Million Roses. We love Katamari. If you've never played the Katamari series of games, then it's basically like taking your mind to a spa retreat. Your eyes will soak in a cavalcade of colours and you'll be tasked with the bizarre but strangely relaxing task of rolling everything up into a ball, all for the joy of your dad, who also happens to be the king of the cosmos. Oh yeah, it's also very weird, yet that is why we love it. What we don't love about We Love Katamari, however, is the game's secret ending, which not only felt like a slap in the face, but because of the time it took to unlock it, felt like the aforementioned slap was going in slow motion and the person doing it was dragging their nails agonizingly across your face. To better explain, come the end of this title, you're tasked by your dad to roll up 1 million roses, which when you consider that you've rolled up cities, towns and continents doesn't seem like too much of a hassle. The problem is, however, is that these roses only spawn in set numbers, meaning that you can only collect small increments at a time when you load up the game, meaning that this task will literally take you weeks to complete. However, let's just say that you went through the rigmarole of learning to roll and balled up 1 million roses. So, what's your reward? Well, if you wanted a sarcastic slap on the back from your old man and a message saying that this was to teach you the meaning of perseverance, then you're in luck. But for everyone else expecting a bit more, well, sorry my friend, there's absolutely nothing of value here for you. Cheers. Number 5. Run Out the Clock. Shenmue HD. If there's one thing about the almighty Shenmue, yes, I will say it correctly once because apparently people get annoyed about that, hammers home at nearly every opportunity, it's that your father is most definitely dead and that Lan Di is the man responsible. What follows is a rip-roaring adventure comprised of pretty ropey dialogue, outstandingly strange quick-time events, and a healthy bit of duck racing to boot. However, it's things like the aforementioned quack-quack qualifying laps that ended up eating a lot of players' time, as they seemingly abandoned their quest for revenge and indulged in arcade machines, fight clubs, and hidden side quests, and just so much more. Now, this usually isn't too much of a problem as you are given ample time to solve the case, but should you become so consumed by side activities that you end up passing a full calendar year, you'll unlock a super secret and, well, rather depressing ending for yourself. Here we see our main hero return to the dojo to see that Lan Di is actually returned. Not content with waiting for you to find him, he's come knocking at your door instead. This leads to our hero declaring that he will avenge his father before, well, totally not doing that and getting killed in a single move. That'll teach you to waste time on gacha machines. Number 4. The dog ending. Silent Hill 2. How is it possible that literally decades after its release, Silent Hill 2 remains as one of the most fascinating horror video game experiences going? Not only does it have a wickedly sharp narrative, but its enemy design, especially the iconic Pyramid Head, are phenomenal. It's also one of the tensest atmospheres going, putting many other horror titles to shame by reveling in the idea that sometimes less is most definitely more. It's also got a secret ending where it turns out that a dog was controlling the entire event. Yeah, for some reason I always forget that this exists, and it blows my mind each and every time I rediscover this moment. Watching James walk into the hilarious control room only to collapse and cry, prompting the dog to come over and lick his face, is at once one of the most disturbing things I've seen in a horror video game, but easily also one of the most hilarious. Not even the UFO angle that the series previously went with and then returned to with the other secret Silent Hill endings could top this. It was just too perfect. Number 3. Tea Party for the Gods. Hades. Hades as a video game is so very easy to fall in love with. Not only is it utterly stunning, but its addictive gameplay loop is so perfectly balanced that it's no wonder that people were more than ready to complete the game over and over in order to unlock its secret ending. But the best part is that this secret ending isn't actually the only one. While many assume that doing 10 runs in order to unlock the full backstory of the gods is the be-all and end-all, there's actually a secret hidden epilogue of content that requires you to complete the story, well, dozens more times. You'll know that you're on the right path when you meet Persephone and she has a quest marker above her head, as this will trigger the final air quotes mission, which sees you delivering what is in essence an invitation to a tea party for all the gods. Weird, right? Well, things get even weirder at the party, because here Persephone reveals the truth to the guests that she is both alive and the mother of Zagreus, to which they respond pretty well considering, leading to a rather iconic shot of Hades and Zeus shaking hands and wishing each other the best. It truly is a wonderful moment and well worth the effort to get there. But upon taking a step back, you start to realize that you spent quite possibly hundreds of hours organizing a glorified tea party, and that is sure to make you say a rather exasperated, "What?" Number 2. Drink beer, eat rats. Mortal Shell. Mortal Shell, one of the few Dark Souls clones that actually stands far enough apart from its inspirations that you can start to appreciate its nuances. When you're in the thick of combat, smashing the marble off meaty enemies and then hardening in an instant to tank a blow, you really start to see what Mortal Shell is all about. Perseverance, determination, and of course a hell of a lot of swinging those mighty weapons. But what if all of this sounds a little bit too much like effort? Well, luckily developer Cold Symmetry has you covered, because they actually programmed in a secret ending that is both genuinely shocking and also surprisingly chill. Once the player locates Baghead the Brigand, you're able to engage in a special dialogue with him if you're carrying a roasted rat and also some superior moonshine. He'll ask if he can have both items off you and then offer you to join him in the life of being a brigand, singing songs, eating rats and drinking until the world ends, to which you can say yes. This will then cut to the pair of you just chilling out and reveling long into the night as images of the world around you crumble under the weight of ghouls and other nasty creatures. It's a brilliant and rather twisted moment of respite, sure to leave your jaw on the floor. And number 1, the serious ending, the Stanley Parable. We're all well aware by now that the Stanley Parable is not your typical gaming experience. Far from it, in fact, as this title is basically a deconstruction of the very medium, while at the same time thumbs its fingers at your so-called preconceived notions. It's also a game that doesn't take itself too seriously, until that is, it most definitely does. You see, even though the game boasts a ton of ludicrous endings that are sure to make your head spin, it also includes one that acts as both a reward and weirdly a punishment. So, say you wanted to check out all these endings for yourself, but didn't want to replay the game over and over in order to do so. Well, if you're playing the game on PC, you'll likely look up some console commands in order to create a specific save state or dive into the files or use some cheats. However, in doing the latter, you're taken to the serious room, aka a room with no exits and just a solitary table in the middle. Here, the narrator will lecture you about the ramifications of cheating at great length, and the only way to escape this is to restart the game once more. Hilariously, you can actually input the SV_cheats1 command in multiple times, causing the narrator to grow more and more frustrated that you're clearly not learning your lesson. Still, as a secret ending of sorts, it's completely off the wall. Some game overs go above and beyond in order to humiliate, shock, and downright annoy players to such an extent that only one word will form on our tongues, like a burning spear bursting forth, leaving us to scream at our monitors and screens, "What?" So let's take a look at them today. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 video game overs that made you say, "What?" Number 8. SpongeBob SquarePants Super Sponge on the PS1. If there's one thing that you can pretty much expect, they demand from a SpongeBob SquarePants experience, it is silliness. No matter what the occasion, the setup of this show is that the central cast are going to have a wacky time and that all will end well no matter how crazy things may get. Therefore, you probably didn't ask for a heavy dose of clinical depression in a SpongeBob SquarePants video game. Yet that's unfortunately what you're going to get from the Super Sponge title. Here you're tasked with getting a present for Patrick, but should you fail in your mission, you'll be presented with a bleak ending and some truly disturbing imagery. Patrick will begin lamenting that he's alone and that nobody loves him and that all of his friends have forgotten his birthday. It's pretty grim, right? Well, it's not as weird as the fact that for some reason he's smiling while telling us this. That's right, he's reeling off feelings of loneliness while having a chipper smile on his face. It is beyond creepy, and it makes for a game over that is sure to leave you questioning what the hell you've just seen. Number 7. Friday the 13th for the NES. There's nothing quite like the brutal fashion in which the Friday the 13th video game for the NES dispassionately reveals its game over screen to the player, stating in no uncertain terms that you have failed with the iconic words, "You and your friends are dead." It's so definitive that it's quite frankly stunning. However, what makes this ultimate cocktail of defeat and utter gobsmacking whatness is what has likely led you to this moment, as this LJN-produced horror title is an utter horror show when it comes to its gameplay. Obtuse objectives, weak as picked-on-paper protagonists, and a Jason that will straight-up box you to death in a manner reminiscent of Punch-Out! Make this title a true chore to experience, and one that will leave you reeling at every turn. Round a corner, there's Jason looking to haymaker you into oblivion. On a boat, there he is again, acting like he's a bloody horror-themed hovercraft. And what do you have to fight him with? Oh good, some rocks. Seeing this game over screen is very likely to make you say what for so many reasons, amongst which may well be, what am I doing with my life? This game is utter garbage. Number 6, Goodbye Cruel Park Theme Park. I don't think that I've ever witnessed a game over as bleak and unfitting as that presented in Theme Park. Now, to be honest, for the longest time, I didn't even know that you could get a game over in this title and thought that the experience was all about just having a good time and maybe, I don't know, maybe sending some people to their deaths with roller coasters that launched them into the stratosphere. What? I was raised on The Sims. I've been bred to kill video game characters in weird ways. Still, if you do manage to screw things up royal, then you can be witness to one of the most disturbing endings possible, which sees the owner of the park basically do a denim renum from the IT crowd and just leap to their death. Now, the game tries to play it for laughs, and I use that with air quotes by showing that the park owner then appears back on the windowsill, but still, the funeral march is being played, the grim atmosphere is still here, and the fact that all of this happens in the reflection of a picture of the owner's family, it's all a bit much. Death by suicide being used for a joke in a game of this nature? What were they thinking? Number 5. Okay. Goemon's Great Adventure. Okay, so, what doesn't even begin to describe this one? If you're to ever hit the dirt in the outrageously enjoyable Goemon's Great Adventure for the N64, then you, the player, will be treated to a game over so utterly, downright, and insanely weird that it transcends the medium and should be printed out and hung in a gallery. It should be converted into its purest essence and sprayed like a perfume, or ground down so that we can eat it, because this is so utterly bonkers that I want more of it. For you see, this game over here is of an overtly muscled and supremely oiled up devil flexing and posing while a luminescent game over text flashes above him. Oh, and by the way, there's an accompanying soundtrack of women moaning in pleasure, where you'll be praying that your significant other or parents can't hear this noise, as it's a screen that you'll want to stay on just to explore the weirdness. It turns out that you can even control his posing, meaning that this is an interactive, pose-down orgasm simulator. How the hell can you not say what to this? Number 4, Every Death in the Messenger. I absolutely adore it when games go that extra mile when it comes to making game overs feel like just more than placeholder screens informing you that you both sucked and died. The Arkham series, using its villains to poke fun at you as you lay gasping for breath, was inspired, and having Styx break the fourth wall to berate you with his barbs was utterly brilliant. You know what? I've covered both of these before a fair few times, so let's take a look at another example of this game over goodness. The Messenger is a gloriously beautiful and utterly engrossing retro platform, combining old school difficulty alongside newer gaming mechanics in order to create a brilliant experience through and through. Its attention to detail is stunning, and the concept of death, it seems, didn't escape the developers' notice. Each and every time you die, Quarble, a being who rewinds time just as you're about to die, as long as you can afford his services, will step in and give you a verbal beatdown sure to leave you reeling. From calling you out for your mistakes, offering up some cheeky banter such as claiming that your death was great timing because it was his turn to buy a round, Quarble injects life and personality into death itself. What a top lad. Number 3, The Giant Launcher, Skyrim. I don't think that I can make a list of game overs that left you utterly slack-jawed without including this, as while it is definitely a moment that is memed to oblivion so much that it's become bloody Morrowind, nice little joke there, wasn't it? The Giant Launcher death in Skyrim still remains one of the funniest and most unbelievable moments in gaming history. I actively remember my first kissing the sky experience, and I'm going to detail it for you today. So I'd made an orc character known as Grubby, who wasn't all that fussed about stopping the end of the world and just wanted to live it up as best he could before the fiery apocalypse hit. So far, his adventures had taken him into dark, dank burrows where he'd found horrible beasts, dusty vampiric tombs, and even into the Thieves Guild where he'd learned how to borrow like a pro. All of this adventuring and purse snatching had led him to acquire a fair bit of wealth. And now, decked out in some resplendent armor and riding atop his noble steed Big Barry, he set his sights on the horizon and said, "Are you ready for me, world?" Yes, it turns out, yes, it was ready for him, as not 2 minutes later I'd come across a giant encampment and been launched into the sky like I was a carnival attraction going toe-to-toe with Brock fucking Lesnar. What doesn't even begin to describe this? Number 2, walking forward a bit. Kingsfield 4. Who would have thought that you could end up biting the big one in a video game just by walking forward a little bit? Well, such is the cruel trick that is played on those looking to try and best Kingsfield 4, which, and I kid you not, will send you plummeting to your doom not 10 seconds into the game if you're not careful. The adventure begins with you outside of a rather spicy looking establishment, with some lava to the left of you and a rock wall to your right. The only thing of note here is a small green weed-like plant on the ground. Now, as a hardcore gamer TM, you'll want to pick up that plant because it's green, and green in games usually means health. However, it's as the ground gives out from underneath you and you begin falling into the lava upon approaching it that you suddenly remember that this is a From Software title and they utterly hate you. So yeah, you can die just by walking forward, a game over that is sure to leave many first-time players yelling "what" in frustration and despair. Cool. And number 1, The Dance of Death, Quest for Glory 1. The common expression, "dance on your grave," is often said when implying that you'll be happy when one person you legitimately despise dies. Yet, it's given a rather strange twist in the equally strange title, Quest for Glory. As you can imagine, since Quest for Glory is from the minds of Sierra Entertainment, the title is chock full of off-the-wall humor and incredibly silly comedy moments. And the ways in which you can meet your maker are almost endless. You can get bashed into a paste by an ice troll, get bounced on by a giant slimy sack that looks like it's from a discount Boy and His Blob ripoff, and of course, you can literally dance yourself to death. Partway through the game, the player's custom hero will encounter a ring of graves, with a ring of mushrooms within this. And as soon as you step into this ring, in rather odd fashion, you'll be immediately requested to dance. And you're now presented with an option, to either refuse, accept, or sheepishly mention that you don't know how to dance. And by either selecting yes or no will actively doom your adventure as you proceed to bust a move under duress from the fairies that were residing within the ring until your heart gives out. The accompanying music and animation of your dance of death is utterly hypnotic and will only ever leave you shaking your head in disbelief at what you've just witnessed once the game over screen hits. What indeed. Hello all of you little demons, Jules here for WhatCulture.com, back again with another episode of the awesomely named and awfully hosted Choose Your Own Adventure, the weekly medieval theme format where I, the crown Jules of WhatCulture.com, take a list chosen by you, yes you, the person who is a couple of hours away from being on holiday for a week, baby! Yes, that's right, I will be away for a week. Hopefully that won't mess up with the Choose Your Own Adventure stuff because we've recorded stuff in advance, but who knows? I will look very tired by the time that I come back because Uncle Jules has got to look after 2 kids under the age of 10. Pray for Mojo. Yes, you get to decide what list I dole out to you each and every week, and this week we have none other to thank than...
At any rate, that is what we're going to try to do.
Ex Incognito for their suggestion of the weirdest, craziest, over-the-top video game crossovers, which I've applied my YouTube magic and come up with the title of 8 video game crossovers that made you say, what? Because time and time again, developers have colluded with other franchises to digitally port their IPs into other games, resulting in a huge jaw drop from fans who never expected to see familiar faces pop up in new locales, or because their mere existence in the game itself is causing all sorts of mind melting. And sometimes crossovers can become such a focal part of the game that they become embedded in that game's main selling point, but needless to say, all of the ones that are on this list, well, they made us say that one resounding word that sums up befuddlement, confusion, disbelief, surprise, and altogether, shock. I'm talking about what? As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 video game crossovers that made you say what? And you know the drill by now, say hi to me here in the live chat and pop your suggestions for next week's episode down in the comment section below. But with that in mind, let's get on with this list, shall we? Number 8, Pokemon and Dynasty Warriors, Pokemon Conquest. Now, I I don't know if I've mentioned this a couple of 100 times on this series alone, but I'm quite partial to, what's the word? Oh yeah, knocking officers right into the bloody moon and pretending that I am a god of the three kingdoms, aka I love me some Dynasty Warriors. No matter how many times this story is retold, repackaged, and really likes to drag things out now with who to add into the roster next, I will buy each and every Dynasty Warriors game without fail. Yes, even the bad ones. So I can punish my thumbs for the crime of being attached to this stupid body. I even delve into the offshoot games that spawned from dalliances with Gundam, Persona, and The Legend of Zelda, each of which added their own sauce to the meaty steak that was the original DW experience. But here's my problem, fellow nerds. None of these offshoots were mad enough. But then along came a little gem known as Pokémon Conquest. Because this game is utterly mad. This is Dynasty Warriors deciding to strike up the band and Charleston its way over to the good fellows at Game Freak and ask for a dance, because Pokémon Conquest was deliciously nuts. Not only was this a fusing of two very, very different IPs, but it also presented a brand new battle system reminiscent of Final Fantasy Tactics, making this a game full of familiar concepts but served up in a totally new way. And the best thing about this fusion is that it's actually legitimately an amazing game. It's got a beautifully realized world, some fantastic characters, and their lovely relationships between their cute and cuddly critters that then allow you to take them into battle and utterly obliterate your enemies. I love everything about this game, and so many people have slept on this. Number 7, Star Wars and Fortnite. Fortnite. Whether you love it or loathe it, there is no denying the sheer staying power of Fortnite. Now, this title, despite all of its detractors, still pulls in a daily player count that most game companies could only ever dream of, and with that large audience comes the ability to market the ever-loving piss out of them, which in turn draws the eyes of sponsors and collaborators from all reaches of the globe, leading to a title that quite possibly has the most IP crossovers ever. From God of War to the Avengers to Dragon Ball, Fortnite has seen them all and worked with them all, mostly to great success and great response from the fans. However, there was one crossover that didn't go quite as planned, and by that I mean that it sat in the mouths of many of fans of both Star Wars and Fortnite as being, well, a big old pile of doo-doo. Now, in the lead up to the release of the third film in the Star Wars sequel trilogy, the higher-ups at Fortnite were approached with the idea of promoting the flick in a rather unique way. Here, after completing a special Star Wars event, those watching would learn before anyone else that Darth Sidious, aka Emperor Palpatine, was still alive, with his voice then echoing out across the galaxy. It was a bold move, to say the least, and in fact you could replace bold with absolutely f***ing stupid, because A, you are completely alienating those Star Wars fans who don't play Fortnite, and believe it or not, there's a lot of people who don't play Fortnite, but like Star Wars, those Venn diagrams aren't intersecting in the way that I thought they would either. And B, you're also putting this major movie reveal in bloody Fortnite, a game with no relation to the sci-fi property. Needless to say, things went down about as well as Jango Fett versus Mace Windu. Pretty badly. Number 6, Fire Emblem and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Now, when you take a step back and look at the almightily swollen roster that is the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate game, it's very easy to get overwhelmed just because of how many different franchises are coalescing on one point. Each and every time a new player would be announced, fans would have literally no idea what to expect and were summarily blown away again and again, making this title a perpetual wave of what that we just absolutely love to ride. That being said, if there was one point that Sakurai really wanted you to know outside of the fact that he thinks that Kirby is Nintendo's hard man, he's not. It's the fact that he has most definitely heard of the Fire Emblem video game franchise. He has heard of it, and he wants you to know, because he managed to sneak 8 characters into this game. Thanks, mate. Like, we get it, it's a great franchise, but the level of what on show here only grew with each passing drop, to the point that by the time the final Fire Emblem pack was announced, it was met with an eye roll and a headshake from all but the most die-hard of fans. Meaning that it was less of a what and more of a what? What? Number 5, Metal Gear Solid and Ape Escape. Metal Gear Solid. Now, I think that we're all in agreement that when it comes to Hideo Kojima games, especially Metal Gear Solid, that things are a little bit deranged from time to time. You've got your Princess Beach moments. You've got your hour-long cutscenes. You've got your whatever the hell Psycho Mantis and Vamp and pretty much every single character in the game are all about. Your Fat Mans. Hey, Fat Man. Yo, what's up? But there's one thing that got even crazier than all of this, and that's when Logic took an absolute banana peel slide with the introduction of the Ape Escape collaboration with Metal Gear Solid. Now, Metal Gear Solid was a minigame that cropped up in the wonderfully silly Ape Escape 3 title, and while you might assume that it would be a bare-bones riff on the MGS series, it actually included a full campaign complete with a creative twist on the stealth action gameplay of the aforementioned series, and featured the unbelievably cute Peepo Snake as the lead. I want to adopt this, please. I'll take 10. Not only was this a joy to play thanks to how refreshing it was, but it was also a crossover that was echoed in Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater with the Snake vs. Monkey minigame, which sees Snake have his holiday interrupted by the Colonel in order to capture some rogue apes. Now, whomever or whatever was the catalyst behind these amazing crossovers, I thank you from the bottom of my simian heart. In fact, I'm going to do something that only the true apes out there and give the ultimate form of respect. That's for the real ones. That's for the real ones out there. Long story short, I really enjoyed this. Number 4, the entire Dream Mix TV World Fighters roster. So if you thought the likes of Marvel vs. Capcom and the aforementioned Super Smash Bros. Series had pretty interesting and varied rosters, well, you ain't seen nothing yet, because Dream Mix TV Fighters basically kicks open the door to the dining hall and says, "Look who's been invited to dinner. These weirdos." Bomberman, Bloody Roar, Metal Gear Solid, Castlevania, Adventure Island, and even the likes of Transformers all came together in this game to ask each other one simple question. What the hell are we doing here? And this question was asked very aggressively with fists and explosives. If you've ever wanted to have your mind blown by the sight of Megatron being taken down by Tyson from bloody Beyblade, then this is the absolute brain blender for you. And while the roster might appear insignificant to the swollen chops of Smash Bros, the sheer fact that some of these franchises are even getting an outing is huge. Oh, and one more thing. One of the characters you can play as in this game is an Easter Island statue. Okay? Just so we're clear? That this game is insane? Okay, cool. Fine. Bye. The story mode to this title is equally bizarre as well, with the plot revolving around a TV show that is experiencing diminishing returns and so decides to spice things up the only way they know how, by ripping open time and space itself and grabbing fighters from alternate realities to fight to the death for their amusement. I'm not gonna lie, I would actually watch that show. But also, what? Number 3, any video game and food crossover. Now, I think it goes without saying that the most Brechtian moment that you can have when playing video games, aka a moment where you become aware of what you're doing, playing, watching, eating, whatever, is when real-life companies stick their dirty old todger right into the mix and wipe their oily grease all over the place. You're just like, why? This is meant to be escapism. I am not escaping this consumerism. In these moments, we totally detach from our escapism to either cringe into the fetal position or laugh ourselves to death at the sheer absurdity of what we're witnessing. And you know what? It just keeps on happening. Noctis telling us how good cup ramen is. Pizza Hut serving up a slice of pain in Monster Hunter Frontier with a pizza-based weapon. Monster Energy Drink giving the go-ahead for their beverages to turn your piss into bioweapons in Death Stranding. It just seems that you can never escape the grasp of capitalism. Now, while most are derided by audiences as try-hard moments so blunt that it would be like using a flip-flop as a surgical knife, there are actually some crossovers that are just so utterly weird that they become, I don't know, kind of tasty. I mean, take, for example, EverQuest 2, which buddied up with Pizza Hut to offer in-game ads that let you order pies through the game without having to stop play. Now, I know that on paper that sounds like a gross kind of Orwellian Wall-E nightmare sort of thing of just being able to eat, sleep, Pizza Hut, repeat. But at the same time, you kind of had to admire the sheer ballsiness of it, because that is an ad campaign that just goes, mate. Ooh. I'm never going to make that motion again. That has been banned. No one a gif that. Number 2, Resident Evil and Under the Skin. Under the Skin. Now, I'll tell you what, despite occasionally putting out a stinker from time to time and maybe being a bit too aggressive with microtransactions in some of their games, Capcom as a publisher definitely seems the sort that would, I don't know, throw down the pens and pencils and pick up the pints, because it just seems like a bit of a rowdy sort, as the ideas that it brings to the table from time to time, well, they are only the stuff that a pub legend could come up with. Just take a look at all of the incredible crossovers that we got with the likes of Monster Hunter or Marvel vs. Capcom or DMC in Beautiful Joe. Yet while many of these are impressive, none of them are weird enough to make you say, what? Which is why I finally get to introduce one of my all-time favourite cult classic PS2 video games, Under the Skin. A title that is so drenched in weird that it's making the sofa that it sat on smell funny. To begin with, the very premise of this title is incredibly odd, with you playing an alien sent to Earth to prank the inhabitants in order to impress those back home. But things get truly bizarre when you reach the Raccoon City level, in which you must now prank a ton of Resident Evil zombies alongside dealing with Jill Valentine and even the bloody Nemesis. To see that horrifying burnt horse tooth face rendered in such a cute cel-shaded sprite is jaw-dropping enough. But when you couple these visuals with the act of pranking zombies, well, you might as well just mail your brain to the moon for how much sense that it makes. Oh, I've lost my brain. Oh, I'm dead. Bye. And number 1, Fire Emblem and Shin Megami Tensei Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE. Seriously, that took me about 7 attempts to say the name of this game. Why did they choose such weird names for this? Dumb. Then they added Encore onto the end of it when it got the Switch port. I'm calm. Let's talk about the crossover. Oh, look who it is, the bloody Fire Emblem franchise once more, here to take up even more gaming space outside of their own franchise. What the hell's going on here? What's that? It's a crossover with Fire Emblem that has barely any Fire Emblem in it. It's about what? Okay, we gotta talk about this. So Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE, alongside having a rather stupid name, was originally pitched as being a proper mashup between the ever-popular Shin Megami Tensei series and the ever-present Fire Emblem franchise, and according to sources would have involved time travel with choices made in the past that affect the present. However, what fans got to experience when the game dropped in 2015 was an entirely different beast. And by that, I mean that this game centered on pop idols, with the only lightest waft of recognition given to Fire Emblem as characters in this game adopted the clothing choices and mannerisms of well-known FE characters. This was a veritable baker's dozen of what? Just from the plot alone, but was also a bit of a slap in the face for fans expecting something a little more equally weighted in the crossover department, which provided another layer of confusion. Still, with that said, the game was pretty well received with regards to its design and battle system, so yeah, if you want a crossover with minimal crossing over, this game's for you.
Hello all of you beautiful people, Jules here for WhatCulture.com, and no matter how good a piece of entertainment is, be it a play, movie, or indeed video game, if the project can't stick the landing, then this will be all that the audience can talk about on their exit. So many projects have had the wheels just come off in the final act and just slid to a horrible halt. Some video game endings are so downright confusing, illogical, or downright off the wall that as the credits begin to roll, all you're able to do is feel your jaw slackened in amazement and utter the well-worn battle cry of what? So come with me on a journey of the meaningless and sometimes mad endings that kept you up at night wondering what the hell the developers were thinking. So I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 video game endings that made you say what? Number 8, Echo, The Tides of Time. Echo the Dolphin is such a strange game, isn't you? You'd be likely led to believe that the title was going to be a relaxed and rather chill affair with maybe a light dousing of puzzles here and there thanks to the rather calming opening stage. But if you're to take an even cursory glance over the later levels, you might feel your brain drip out of your ear. Time travel? Atlantis? Aliens? It may be the case that your what limit has already been broken by the events of the original game, but trust me, you have not seen anything yet, as the sequel, Tides of Time, takes weird and gets freaky with it. Come the close of the second game, you've chased the alien Vortex Queen back through time to try and stop her from contaminating all of life so that she will rule the world in the future. This backfires horrendously for the Queen as she's sent to the prehistoric era and finds that she's unable to control the animals of this time, and thus ends up being absorbed into the time stream once more. Huzzah! Echo saved the day, right? Well, kind of. Echo did actually fail to stop the Queen from time time traveling backwards and it was just sheer luck that she couldn't enact her plan, but at least for our porpoise adjacent pal, he can go home to be with his pod, right? Wait, what do you mean he's using the time machine to just disappear into an unknown era? Why? What's the plan there, mate? Hello? Oh, brilliant, the game's just over and there's no rhyme or reason given for any of this. Cheers. Number 7. The Matrix: Path of Neo. When it comes to the Matrix franchise, fans are pretty much used to being screwed with on a continual basis, as after all, if you can't even trust that delicious juicy steak that you're eating as being real, how the hell can you trust anything you see or hear beyond that? Still, even the Wachowskis managed to find another way to utterly scramble your brain when it came to their Path of Neo video game, which for the most part retells the biggest action set pieces and fights from across the series. Yet, just as you're about to batter Agent Smith into base elements and go all martyr on his ass, the Wachowskis themselves interject into the video game to inform you that all of that Jesus stuff in a video game would make for a boring ending. Therefore, they propose that instead of watching Neo sacrifice himself, that you will now take on a monstrous Agent Smith made of all the other copies of him and about half a city block. If this sudden departure from the expected ending doesn't leave you reeling, then the sight of the Mecha Smith putting on a pair of giant prop sunglasses and then smiling before the battle begins certainly will. Number 6. I have no mouth and I must scream. I love that even describing the weirdness that is I have no mouth and I must scream as a game isn't actually technically even correct, as it's actually an episodic experience that becomes akin to a horror anthology, with each chapter comprising of short 30-minute bursts of brain-bending moments. So many of the puzzles, questions, and musings of the game's cast will make the player's brain feel like a, well, great soft jelly thing, but that is nothing compared to what awaits you come some of this title's endings, for you literally will turn into what I've just described, a great soft jelly thing. Should your actions fail to beat the rogue AI Am, or you end up with an ending where the other forces allow Am to decide your fate, you will end up as a horrific-looking blancmange-like creature devoid of a mouth and pretty much any useful appendages. Making matters worse for your player, the creature is also unable to harm itself and lives forever, meaning that the only thing that you'll have for company for the rest of your prolonged life is an AI who utterly loathes you. Have fun. Number 5. Outlast. Screaming "what" at the top of your lungs might well be a common feature of the Outlast games, as it seems whenever you round a corner you're met with another ungodly abomination that is sure to provoke confusion and indeed panic. However, the first game's ending really does tip the scale into the abyss with its sheer levels of strangeness. Now, throughout the title, you're led to believe that the events going on are of a paranormal nature, what with all the demonic staging and possessed enemies that you seem to encounter. However, as things come to a head, the game decides to flip the table by revealing that all of these horrors were actually caused by nanomachines, controlled by a coma patient who is being held prisoner deep below. Okay, it's a bit of a tonal shift, but you know what, I'll bite. Okay, so from this point on, none of this is magical and it's all just technical. Got it. Except, hang on, how can this be possible, as the Walrider was definitely something that was encountered in World War II through a mystical gateway? And it seems to be sentient enough to select you as a new host. Okay, so maybe it's part magic and part machine. Okay, got it, I think. Oh, wait a minute, I've just been gunned down by the military and somehow the Walrider is able to carry on living without me and kill everyone else in the vicinity. Okay then, I give up. What the hell is going on? Number 4. Asura's Wrath. Asura's Wrath may well be Capcom experimenting with methods to use sheer rage and anger as a means for energy creation, as come the end of this rather beautiful and rather bonkers title, players were likely roaring infernos of anger thanks to all of the non-stop beatdowns that they'd been dishing out. Yet Capcom clearly wasn't satisfied with this rage fuel that they'd created and decided to maximize their output by, and I can't believe they did this, partitioning off the real ending to the game as DLC, turning gamers into literal walking nuclear reactors of rage at the publisher for literally selling them the real final chapters to a game that they had already stumped up money for. To say that gamers the world over screamed "what" at the top of their lungs at this moment is probably an understatement, and in truth was likely just one word amongst a string of curses. But yes, this really was a thing. Annoyingly, the levels themselves are actually really good, as is the final boss battle, but still, no other ending in video game history is as likely to make players seethe with rage more than this. Except maybe number 3, Ghosts and Goblins. Ghosts and Goblins, the epitome of troll game design and also one of my all-time personal favourite series. No matter how steep the challenge, I'm always down for popping into my suit of armour with all the defensive properties of tinfoil and getting stuck in. However, for players who managed to slog their way through the original NES title, they were in for less of a treat and more of a trick when it came to this game's horror show of an ending. You see, despite having battled against enemies that instantly respawn, ignore the level geometry making it impossible to hit them sometimes, and enough insta-kill death pits to make even Bowser a bit sweaty in the shell, Ghosts and Goblins decides to inform the player upon beating Astaroth for the first time that this castle was merely an illusion and that the real adventure can now begin. What? That's right, in a page ripped right out of Dracula's playbook, you have to go through the entire game again and beat the final boss all in one sitting. No wonder this game focuses on ghosts, goblins, and devils, as this title is a slice of gaming hell. Number 2, The Town with No Name. The Town with No Name is quite possibly the strangest and most hilarious game that I've ever played. As a comedy title with a budget amounting to the cost of a Twix bar, the experience is both genuinely brilliant and utterly terrible at the same time. The voice acting sounds like it was recorded in a bin floating through rough waters, the script written by an AI with the loosest possible grasp of what humans talk about, and the action is so stiff that it feels like the code itself has rigor mortis. Nearly every aspect of this game is likely to elicit what from players at some point in time, but none do so in such an acute fashion than in one of the game's endings. Instead of venturing into the town and beginning your adventure, you're given the option to ignore all of this and hop back on the train that you rolled in on. Now, before you think that this is a bit of a boring and uninspired end to your tale, don't worry, as within the span of 10 seconds, things go insane. Our hero spies a young boy who yells, "Come back, Shane," to him, and in response, he shoots the kid stone dead, then in celebration states, "My name's not Shane," before the train itself that he's on turns into a spaceship and flies off. No, please, take your time to digest this, I'll wait. I'm sorry, what? And number 1, Life is Strange. Despite the sheer overuse of the word hella, I, alongside countless others, truly enjoyed my time with Life is Strange. The tonal shift between boring humdrum living and sudden life or death encounters might have given me whiplash enough to have accident claim lawyers add me on speed dial, but the heart and charm of the characters provided more than enough reason to fall in love with this title, as did the sheer amount of micro choices that you made through the game, all of which played some part in each character's fate. You were rewarded as much for snooping around rooms looking for clues as you were actually listening to people's problems and trying to help them without the goal of personal gain. And as each chapter was compounded by a coming storm that threatened to wipe out the town of Arcadia Bay, you just knew that your choices were going to be coming back around real big come the end. However, I don't think that anyone expected to be presented with a choice as utterly ridiculous as they were in the final chapter, where Max is forced to choose between saving the life of Chloe, her childhood friend, or an entire town of people, including her own family. Now, no judgment if you chose Chloe over the town, but the simple act of presenting such a ridiculous choice made many gamers bounce off Life is Strange at its most pivotal moment. Had the stakes been made to feel more equally weighted, then maybe this ending would have struck with the intended heft, but for many this just made them mutter, "What?" as they put poor Chloe in the bloody ground. Hello all of you beautiful people, Jules here for WhatCulture.com, and you know what, in this day and age, the pre-order bonus is a rather common sight. With developers and publishers determined to get back their investments as quickly as possible, what better way to do that than by making people pay for a game that you've actually not yet released? Well, at least we're incentivized to do so with a few often exclusive goodies. Now, before you think that I'll be planting a flag in Tat Mountain that reads all pre-orders suck, do not worry my friends, as there are a fair few gems that make the process actually quite appealing for many. However, the games that we're going to be detailing today are examples of balls that were dropped so hard that they landed in dog feces and then were picked back up and sold to us with smiles on corporate faces. Brilliant. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 video game pre-orders that made you say what? Number 8, Deus Ex Mankind Divided's Augment Your Pre-Order system. For a game all about improving the human body beyond its natural limitations with cybernetic upgrades and augmentations, the pre-order system introduced by Square Enix for Deus Ex Mankind Divided felt like trying to decipher code post-lobotomy. Just look at any of the images provided by Square Enix on what you could hope to get by pre-ordering and from where, and tell me if any of this makes any sense. Easily the dumbest thing about all of this whole process was that Square Enix stated that the amount of pre-order content that would be gifted to players depended on how many people actually pre-ordered in the first bloody place. This led, obviously, to a huge backlash from consumers, pointing out that they were already doing the publisher a favour by pre-ordering at all, so locking content off and teasing them with potentially more was a terrible move. Plus, according to their wonderfully gold chart, no one single version of the game included every pre-order bonus, meaning that it was literally impossible to get everything without multiple pre-order juggling, which is a feature that precisely nobody wanted to do. Thankfully, though, the campaign was cancelled pretty shortly after. Number 7. Griffey, Ni no Kuni. Whereas a lot of the pre-orders on this list will have players cry out, "What?" because of their lack of worth or general cheek, Griffey, the pre-order familiar bonus that one could get from the original Ni no Kuni, left players flabbergasted because it was so utterly broken. Most familiars in this game find themselves rotated out fairly quickly due to newer and more powerful pets taking their place. However, Griffey, well, he was an absolute unit, trivializing battles to the point where it felt like playing on bloody easy mode. As a result, gamers who had this powerful pal in their roster breezed through the game and likely found it less than impactful as a result. And those that didn't have Griffey were willing to pay through the nose for the privilege. At one point in time, codes for this furry fiend were going for upwards of 50 quid, making it a pre-order that you could effectively sell to offset the price of the entire game that you were playing. And that made me say, what? Number 6. Sony's separate PlayStation 5Q. What? This was likely the sound heard all over the world the day that the PS5s went up for pre-order, as while Sony had promised not just the world with their newest console, but also the entire universe when it came to what this machine might be able to do down the line, they failed to actually deliver where it counts, aka actually making enough consoles to meet demand. Stories of sites exploding under the pressure of increased traffic, of retailers putting up pre-orders early, and of scalpers who'd somehow managed to secure about 40 consoles to themselves were absolutely rife, as was the outcry from fans when Sony announced its rather bizarre method to possibly maybe at a push give them a chance to own one through pre-ordering directly with them. Now here, Sony announced that if you registered with them, then you'd possibly be sent a code that let you then pre-order the console. Now remember, that's not a guarantee to get one, just the chance to enter a smaller potluck draw while also giving them and their third-party friends all of your contact details. Brilliant. The fact that it's still hard to get hold of a console today shows how ill-prepared that Sony was. And it's still a pre-order mess that we're reeling from. Number 5. Broken watches, Zero Time Dilemma. Now, in terms of delivering pre-orders actually worth giving a damn about, developer Axis were on a bit of a hot streak, seeing as their previous pre-order tie-ins for the Zero Escape franchise had been of brilliant build quality. However, that all came to a screeching halt with the release of Zero Time Dilemma. As a pre-order, the developer offered fans the chance to own a replica watch from one of the main characters, and unsurprisingly, given the popularity of this gimmick, pre-orders were, along with expectations, incredibly high. Yet, just a few weeks before launch, the developer put out word that the game would be shipping without the watch due to an issue with shipping and manufacturing. Now, fans were understandably upset, but were reassured by GameStop and Amazon that they would get their watches in due course. Sadly, when it came to actually deliver on this promise, Amazon bungled things completely. For fans outside of the US, they were hit with shipping fees and import taxes of up to £100, thanks to this watch's perceived value of $500 bumping up insurance costs on the package, meaning that they were effectively paying for a free pre-order. Making matters worse, the watches had a ton of issues, with many being completely unusable, meaning that Zero Time Dilemma came to take on a very literal meaning, because that was a dilemma that left people with literally zero time. Number 4. Ranger Mode, Metro Last Light. Don't you just hate it when you're looking at an object that is clearly well made and with a huge amount of care put into it, and then you just notice a dirty great mark that looks like somebody's unclean arse took a scoot over one part of it? It suddenly becomes less a showpiece that you want to share with your friends and more of a blight that you can't ignore, and you have to ask why the hell it's even there in the first place. Such was the case of Metro Last Light's incredulously rubbish pre-order idea of taking a much requested and indeed much loved difficulty mode known as Ranger Mode and only offering it as a pre-order bonus. This stinky business decision caught the flack and ire of the community, who couldn't believe an entire difficulty mode was effectively being paywalled. Now, we're used to scrounging in the post-apocalypse of the Metro universe, but even this was too desperate for many, making the backlash to the announcement pretty considerable. Number 3. A football. Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. When somebody says the words Assassin's Creed, your mind might instantly begin to conjure up images of parkour acrobatics, of hooded figures leaping from rooftops, of deadly games of cat and mouse, of everyone's favourite hero Desmond, and of course, a 3-point field goal. Wait a minute, one of these doesn't sound right. I know what it is. Desmond wasn't anyone's favourite. All kidding aside, for some unknown reason, Ubisoft agreed to the bizarre pre-order bonus of an American football for people who ponied up the cash early when it came to Black Flag's launch window. Now, as a man who has little to no interest in American football, I am still aware that there was a team called the Pirates back in the day, and also that there's another team called the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But unless Black Flag was aiming to hit those two markets and only those two markets, that seems like a very odd choice. Still, if you wanted to lob around a branded ball with only the loosest possible connection to a video game, this is your chance. Number 2. Potions? Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire Dual Pack. Now, the Pokemon franchise has never really had to try hard to shift units, what with the ever-rabid fan base willing to part with Poke pennies each and every time a new edition emerges from the long grass. Maybe as a result, it might explain why Game Freak has been pretty terrible at offering incentives for people to pre-order the games. Take, for example, the outstandingly bad pre-order for the Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire Dual Pack from Amazon, which would reward all would-be trainers with admittedly 2 brilliant games in one, but also a code for a whopping 200 potions. Potions? Are you kidding me? In a series in which full restores are pretty much the minimum that most trainers will accept, you're handing out 200 potions. Oh, I can't wait to glug about 20 of these in order to make a dent on my HP bar. This is even worse than the previous pre-order code that gave players 200 Pokeballs, because at least with that they could at least spam the bloody things to at least catch something. And number 1, an exclusive ship, Destiny. Right, so let me set the scene. You've just heard the tale of a fantastical new sci-fi loot and shoot experience known as Destiny. It's made by the magical minds behind the Halo series, and it's looking to be all sorts of explosive fun. With every image that drips into the public conscious, your wallet heaves and strains as it tries not to burst open and drown Bungie with pre-order pennies. And then it happens. Bungie announces that one of their pre-order bonuses for Destiny is an exclusive ship that will ferry you from planet to planet. The wallet, oh no, like a dam, it bursts and coins rain into the hungry mouths of the developers and Activision, their publisher. It's a shame then that this pre-order turned out to be less ship and more shit, as the new spacecraft that you got was actually only ever visible in loading screens and had no impact elsewhere on the game, meaning that while you stared at Destiny's lengthy load times, all you were reminded of was that you basically paid extra for a non-interactive wallpaper. Cheers. Hello all of you little demons, Jules here for WhatCulture.com, back again with another episode of the awesomely named and awfully hosted Choose Your Own Adventure, the weekly medieval themed format where I, the crown jewels of WhatCulture.com, take a list chosen by you, yes you the person who has just started working out again properly and I cannot stand up. It is a good thing that the YouTube community has deemed that I have no legs, because if I did have them, they would be very, very sore and very wobbly. I'm talking Bambi. I'm just like... Regardless, keep pushing for the burn, my friends. It takes a lot of effort to change your body, so big love to you, my friend. Keep at it. You can do it. Yes, you get to decide what list I dole out to you each and every week. And this week we are talking about video game sequels that were just so utterly bizarre, so off the wall that they made us say in unison, "What?" Despite being a factor of the video game industry that you could set your bloody watch by, the video game sequel is anything but a sure thing when it comes to the content that it carries over from the original game. From changing mechanics, updating characters, or completely redesigning everything from the ground up, sometimes sequels can almost be unrecognizable even within their own library. So let's take a look at the weird, the wonderful, and the most definitely what? As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 video game sequels that made you say, what? Number 8, Persona 4 Arena. Now, when it comes to the Persona series, it might as well come with a What certified seal of approval stamped all over every game that's come out of it, because they are very strange. In fact, you might feel like you've just gone 12 rounds with Muhammad Ali, but he's replaced his boxing gloves with fishing rods for how much they will be making you reel with body blow after strange body blow. Still, I can honestly say that nobody expected a sequel to the utter masterclass that was Persona 4 to have come in the form of a 2D fighting game. This was the equivalent of Dynasty Warriors jumping from fighter to open world brawler, but in reverse and all the more confusing, as this actually carried over threads of the plot from the prior game, but added in a new level of weirdness on top. To try and clarify what's going on here, the events of this game are actually set after Persona 4, but before that game's epilogue, meaning that it popularized the idea of a pre-sequel way before Borderlands ever spooged their goo all over the idea. And making this all the more strange was the fact that this game was bloody brilliant. No joke, this fighting game came out and embarrassed other titles in the genre, and for that alone, plus the sheer insanity of the direction the franchise took, it deserves your attention. Number 7, GTA 3. It is easy to forget just how utterly game-changing and game-breaking Grand Theft Auto 3 was upon its release. Now, obviously there were 3D open-world-esque games around at that point, but none had approached it with such a chaotic and vibrant energy. This was the Grand Theft Auto experience, and everyone around the world took bloody notice. And for those of you lucky enough not to have played the absolutely hobbled version that claims to be the current definitive edition, they will likely remember the absolutely incredible jump up between GTA 2 and 3. To go from a top-down sprite-based rampage to this was an absolute mind-messer. So much so that even Marvel's Mysterio was like, damn. While the formula would go through so many tweaks and changes across the years and arguably reach the point where anything else will see diminishing returns a la GTA 5, GTA 3 both shattered, reinvented, and redefined its own style like no other franchise at the time. And that's why it gets what I'm introducing as a new concept to the show, the weekly massive thumbs up. Big thumbs up. Do you know what's even more dumber than that? I'll forget about this in about 2 weeks' time. Everyone will be like, where's the big thumbs up? And I'll be like, what? What are you talking about? Memory like a fish. Number 6, Steel Battalion Heavy Armor. So when I first read that Steel Battalion was about to make its grand return to the video game form, I was blown. Mind blown, I should have probably clarified. Absolutely mind blown at the concept, because this was a game that had the most ludicrous and over-the-top controller that I was just like, what? How is this going to fit in my house? How am I going to fit this alongside all of my Rock Band and Guitar Hero plastic utensils that are basically just extensions of my unfulfilled dreams and fantasies? Where am I going to fit this? However, my what turned to what? The moment that I saw that the game would actually be making use of the notoriously Del Boy motion control system known as the Kinect. Now I know what you're thinking, because I thought the same. Surely if you move to this control system, then you'd lose literally the feel of the mech-based video game itself. I mean, the startup sequence was literally one of the biggest facets of it. And you'd be right, because this game f***ing sucked. Cue frantic hand-waving as you tried to get the game to even register that you were in the bloody room, screaming at the TV to just please perform the most basic of actions, and blowing your position when the game read you face-palming and weeping in the corner as launch all missiles. Now I love the fact that as a sequel it tried to do something different. The problem was that everything it tried to do different was wrong. Nobody asked for you to change these things. These were the things that people liked about the game, and you're just like, nah man. What do you mean it's not selling? Piece of... Number 5, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5. Oh, now if I'm truly honest with you here, back in 2015 when this game dropped, it was less of a what factor and more of a
factor because I was utterly disgusted at this game. Yet, as I played on and witnessed the sheer lack of innovation, the horrible thick sludge that covered the controls, and the clipping that acted as the kind of perfect metaphor for how disconnected the developers were with fans at this point in the series, my level of contempt began to rise and rise until I yelled, "What?" at the top of my lungs, and in the process robbed that year's Scream of the Year from Death Heaven's New Bermuda album. Seriously, it is a banger. This was less a sequel made with love and care and more of a resentful squirt of thick piss that felt like an ex handing you back all your stuff after the breakup, but finding out that all your t-shirts have been cut into vests when they just know that you're very sensitive about your hairy upper arms. Oh, I can feel it through the bloody jumper. What are you doing here? Anyway, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 or 5 is a hollow shell of a game featuring fewer skaters, fewer models, just less across the board. And it will leave you in a stunning state of bewilderment that can only truly be summed up with, what the were they thinking? Number 4, Dino Crisis 3. Dino Crisis. Okay, so I'm about to start talking about Dino Crisis 3, and a lot of you will know why this carries with it the what factor in the extreme. But in order to explain to those who maybe weren't around to witness this firsthand, I'm going to bring in long-standing friend of the show and all-time magnificent actor Tim Curry to help express the sheer what level that was going on at this point in time. Now, Tim, thank you very much for appearing on the show. I know that you have a very busy schedule, so thank you very much for taking the time out to be with us here today. Now, I am aware that you were actually instrumental in leading the direction of Dino Crisis around the point that Dino Crisis 3 came out, and were actually in the meeting room when you pivotally pitched the new direction of the franchise. Can you sum up what happened in that moment, please?
Space!
I see. Right. Okay, so we have you to thank for the fact that we are now literally in space in a game that prior to this was just set on an island. And actually, the dinosaurs that we're fighting here aren't actually dinosaurs. They're actually just hybrid DNA that is taking the form of dinosaurs. We have you to thank for that. We have you to thank for the what factor that was shouted in unison around the world when this game came out. We have you to thank for that. Mr. Curry, your silence only incriminates you further. Mr. Curry, what are you doing? No, put that down. Mr. Curry, no! Dramatization may not have happened. Number 3, Driver 3. Oh, Driver 3. What a confusing and strange mess you are, much like myself. Coming off the huge and rather unexpected success of the prior 2 games, hopes were incredibly high for the franchise, especially when it was announced that it would be arriving with a third entry that would contain features, graphics, and physics way beyond its competitors. However, that joy soon turned to disgusting goo in the mouths of many when the game stumbled out after numerous delays, clipped through the floor of the games industry itself, got stuck in the nether, and then promptly itself. A good game, this was not. However, what really gives Driver 3 the big what factor is thanks to its behind-the-scenes development story. After having money shoveled into the game, Atari was desperate for this title to annihilate the likes of GTA, even though they'd need to sell 4 million copies of the game to even recoup their investments. And so figured that the best way to make their title a success story wasn't to give the devs the time to finish the title to a quality standard, but simply buy positive reviews. Now, as Guru Larry pointed out in his brilliant breakdown of this game, and I suggest that you go and watch this because he's a fantastic lad and makes great videos, gaming outlets were sent extremely early copies of this title in exchange for 9 out of 10 reviews. And in Atari's mind, everyone was a winner here. They got their sales, the outlets got their exclusives, and the consumer... that guy. When all of this came out, it made the glaring problems of Driver 3 just much more than those seen on the shoddy surface, because the greed and exploitative nature of Atari was laid bare for all to see. Number 2, Doom RPG. So, James, when you think of Doom, what's the first thing that pops into your head?
Tearing through demons at high speed?
No.
Monstrously glorious gory kills that make you question whether the animator should go and speak to somebody?
No. Well, yes, but no.
The killer soundtrack that helps punctuate the fact that you're blasting through all of those enemies and not giving a flying care in the world.
No, that's just so wrong. You're just embarrassing yourself at this point. I'm going to put you out of your misery, all right? An answer for you. Turn-based combat.
Doom RPG. Yes, that is exactly what Doom RPG offered for mobile players back in 2005, which might as well have come with the tagline, yeah, this is weird, right? Even more shocking than this development choice was the fact that this is actually a really good game. The title, which recreates and amalgamates both Doom 2 and 3 storylines, thus making it a weird spin-off sequel, is a joy to play, albeit at a pace completely at odds with where the series is now. As you roam corridors tile by tile and tackle famous demons from the franchise, it's hard not to be left with your mouth agape and the word what just dribbling across your tongue. As this is the least Doom that a Doom video game can be, but is still very much Doom. And it's probably better than Doom Resurrections. God, that game was And number 1, Alien Isolation. Buck, 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 buck. The evil chicken's back, baby. Buck, 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 buck.
Jules, you know for a fact that I hate it when you do those fingers. And second of all, I don't know what you're on about with Alien Isolation. There's no prequel, there isn't an announced sequel. What are you on about? Huh?
Oh, James, yes, you're right. The evil finger temple is back once more, and that means that I'm once again twisting the rules of reality and bending this list to my whim. Because I'll ask you, is Alien Isolation not a sequel to the Alien film franchise as it's set 15 years after the original film? And if that's not good enough for you, technically it's a sequel to the absolute weeping ass blister that was Colonial Marines, as it's set after that in the timeline and obviously is set in the same universe. So what is a sequel? What's a reboot? What's a standalone entry? They're all sequels to the greater Alien franchise. However, all pedantic elements aside, we need to talk more about this utter beauty of a game, because I won't lie, I said, what? So many times throughout this experience, and for several different reasons. Firstly, the love shown to creating the technology and overall aesthetics of the original movie. Secondly, the incredible sound design, as honestly, it is chef kiss. And last, but certainly not least, the handling of the xenomorph itself. I knew full well about the dual AI that this monster was programmed with, where one controls the body but has no idea where you are, and the other, which does know exactly where you are but can only give clues to the former. But seeing it in action, seeing it figure out I was under a desk or drag me out of a cabinet was something altogether beyond what I could have ever expected. The what right here in this entry might as well have come with that famous Tim and Eric mind explosion meme, because it literally blew my mind. I love this game, and we need to talk more about it, because if we do, we might get a sequel. Let's have some fun, shall we? No, let's not have some fun, Jules. Let's just be sad, shall we? Shut up, Dan. Hello, all you little demons. Jules here for WhatCulture.com, back again with another episode of the awesomely named and awfully hosted Choose Your Own Adventure, the weekly medieval-themed format where I, the crown Jules of WhatCulture.com, take a list chosen by you. Yes, you, the person who is sitting here in a soaking wet cap, because I went out climbing in this and it got chalk all over it, and it definitely looked a little bit, suspect, shall we say, on camera. Yes, you get to decide what list I dole out to you each and every week. And this week we have none other to thank than Ryan Craig for their suggestion of video game special moves that were so outstandingly amazing that you just stood there in astonishment. But I've done my YouTube trickery on that for you, my friend, and changed it ever so slightly to video game special moves that made you say, what? When it comes to video games, there is an absolute kaleidoscope of different special moves that will amaze and astound. Yet one thing that will also mess with your vision and make you see fractals is when you're on the receiving end of one of these powerful world-ending special moves, and boy howdy are there a lot of plum-punching, spine-shattering and mind-melting ones to choose from. Yet there are those that sometimes rise above the gore-soaked pack and provide the player with the option of unleashing such devastation or humiliation that your eyebrows might actually tear off your head in bemusement. Ah, Dan, it's happening to me. Put on the fake eyes again. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Booting up. Ah, sweet relief. So let's unleash some ultras that were over the top. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 video game special moves that made you say, what? And you know the drill by now. Put your suggestions for next week's episode down in the comment section below and say hi to me here in the live chat. Now let's get on with this list, shall we? Number 8, Stimulating Fist of Annihilation, Guilty Gear Xrd. Now, the fighting game genre is home to some of the most outlandish and thoroughly insane special moves. That much is pretty much clear from a cursory glance, yet things have turned into a kind of strange arms race of sorts within competing titles, as after all, when a fireball is most characters' basic special attack, you really have to think outside the box in order to stand out. Or you could, as is the case of Faust from Guilty Gear Xrd, take those fingers and shove them into the box, because his special move is literally a finger up the bum. Yes, that's right, getting some digits in the chocolate chute is this man's special move, and he does so in a manner emulating the real-life Japanese obsession with the kancho prank, which is literally poking your mate in the anus for a laugh. And to be fair, it is very funny. I mean, look at this. Dan, whoop! See, we're good pals, we're good pals. Here, Faust does some rectal examinations of his own, and the results range from downright hilarious to having to pop your game on mute lest your parents hear this utter filth. And what's that? Did somebody call for a montage? Dan, take it away. Ooh, nice. No matter the expression, the outcome is always the same for the player. A moment to reflect on what the actual hell you're doing in this game, while probably muttering, "What?" Number 7, My Final Heaven, Final Fantasy VIII. When it comes to Final Fantasy games, there are plenty of ridiculous moves, spells, and summons to choose from, and in all honesty, it was tough not to put Final Fantasy IX's Arc Summon on this list due to the fact that its animation is slower than tidal erosion and sometimes deals less damage than a regular attack from your party, which most definitely will have you saying what. However, I then remembered how utterly off the rails things get in Final Fantasy VIII in virtually every aspect. From its bonkers timey-wimey plot to the villains that read from the big book of heads all the way through to Doom Train, baby! This game is utterly insane in places. Yet today I want to talk about my main man who should act as the poster boy for never ever ever getting a face tattoo, Zell, and his ridiculous special move, My Final Heaven. You see, Zell's limit break allows the player to enter into a one-on-one fighting minigame, and depending on what combos you input, you'll see our spiky-headed fool drop massive heel kicks, flurries of punches, and headbutts that will rock the bones of your enemies. In addition, the more combos that you put in, the higher the chance of unleashing more powerful attacks, the ultimate of which being My Final Heaven. Summoning all of his power, Zell rushes towards his enemy only to completely bypass them and zoom off into the distance. We then cut to Zell running around the entire globe only to come back and land a single punch on his opponent. It is the epitome of ridiculous. I mean, imagine that, just going all the way around the world for one punch. And it's made even worse by the fact that that punch very rarely kills the enemy. So he's just gone like, dink. And the enemy's just there like, yep, I mean, that was impressive, but now you've wasted a lot of your endurance, so, blah, 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 blah. Idiot. Classic Zell, am I right? Number 6, That First Waterfowl Dance, Elden Ring. Now, if you're looking for an example of a factory of what moments, then Elden Ring pretty much has you covered. With enemies that block out the sun with their sheer heft to environments that are jaw-droppingly impressive, you'll never be short of things to marvel at and question just how the FromSoft devs managed to cram this many iconic moments into just one masterpiece. Kind of like yours truly, right? I mean, how does he do it? How does he look this good and deliver lines this badly? That being said, a rather large portion of incredulous expressions also came from the game utterly battering you like you're a cod in a fish and chip shop, as nothing is going to make you exhale like you've had your balls punched up through you, quite like being utterly embarrassed by one of the many, many tough as nails enemies in this game. And let's face it, we all likely had to quietly rethink our lives a little when Melania decided to rock up and do That First Waterfowl Dance, that super combo chain that just leaves you saying, okay, cool. I'm gonna need to step away from this, because it's bullshit. It just goes on and on and on to the point where it's actually kind of hilarious, or at least it would be if you weren't being flayed alive. You can try and dodge, but she will find you. You can try and block, but your stamina will disappear in the blink of an eye, and all that is left is one horrible option. You need to memorize every step, every move, and be in the perfect position to try and survive this absolute onslaught. And in short, you need to, and say it with me, kids, get good. Thanks. Number 5, Beautiful Memory, Darkstalkers. Of all of the underrated fighting games out there, Darkstalkers is utter royalty, weirdly making it the most celebrated game that you've likely never played. Yet, you'd be an utter oxymoron, which is Welsh for carrot, by the way. See, this is educational as well, these shows. If you passed up on the opportunity to play the original, because as fighting games go, this is both fantastically strange and brilliantly engaging in equal measure. And the character roster is utterly insane to boot, allowing you to play as mammoth mummies, voluptuous vampires, whatever the hell Lord Raptor is meant to be, and of course, BB Hood, a Red Riding Hood facsimile with some utterly brutal moves at her disposal. From whipping out a rocket launcher to utterly bricking you with a picnic basket to just shooting you point blank with an Uzi, it is hilarious to see the contrast between her sweet exterior and the violent side that is just underneath. Yet of all her special moves, none will make you question life itself more than Beautiful Memory, in which she reminisces about dear old departed grandmama, and it causes her to cry so much. Now, normally you think to yourself, this probably isn't a good special move, crying, letting your opponent just punch you in the face, but she cries so much that she creates a puddle that she then proceeds to drown her opponent in. But not before pulling out a pair of knives and stabbing you a few times. This game is utterly insane. It is so strange. Number 4, Grovel, God Hand. So God Hand, for those of you unlucky enough to have not played it, is a title that lets you race chihuahuas, fight a gorilla in a wrestling mask, and of course, kick people so hard in the balls that they die, making it both the best and weirdest experience that you can have on the PlayStation 2. It is a game that doesn't take anything seriously and is packed to the rafters with special moves that are outlandishly over the top and wince-inducingly painful looking. Yet of all the roulette special moves at your disposal, there is but one which will make you pull a face akin to when a crypto bro starts telling you that NFTs are definitely due for a comeback in 2024. For the record, it's this. And that is the Grovel special move. Whereas every other move in your arsenal is all about dishing out damage, humiliating your opponent, or achieving instant enlightenment for a quick health boost, Grovel takes you out of the fight, quite literally in fact, and lowers your current adaptive difficulty rating to the lowest setting. This in turn lowers enemies' aggressiveness and their damage output, making for a much easier experience. Now this all sounds lovely and nice, and it actually is quite pleasant to have a break from the crushing difficulty that this game exudes elsewhere, but this is not what God Hand is about. It's about launching people into the stratosphere with ghostly apparitions of a baseball bat. It's about punching people so hard with a giant ethereal palm. It is about punching people in the dick, as I have mentioned. Not watching Gene grovel out an apology. So yeah, weird. What? Number 3, Sticks to Snakes, Dungeons & Dragons Tower of Doom. So Dungeons & Dragons is an experience that is built on special moves, as the game is so utterly granular that even punching an enemy is likely to be delivered alongside, and while I'm doing that, I'll unleash the ghosts of my ancestors through my fingers and cast duplication on myself 8 times so that 8 of me can attack the same spot. Have fun animating that, Dan. Therefore, when booting up any Dungeons & Dragons video game experience, you best believe that fans were expecting some of these skills and spells to appear, and for the most part, it's what you'd expect: fireballs, magic missiles, turn undead, and healing spells. Yet, a rather humorous addition was afforded to the cleric class in Tower of Doom, which certainly caught me off guard. So gather around, fellow adventurers, as I tell you the tale of Sticks to Snakes, a spell that is, well, it's kind of niche in its uses in the game. I mean, I use it a lot when I'm playing just to scare the piss out of anyone who's carrying a torch. Just be like, stick to snakes. So then they've got like a flaming cobra in their hand, which is admittedly top bants. But aside from that, maybe scaring a few people, it's not that useful. It doesn't really do much damage. And most of the times the DMs that I play with say that I can't have a poisonous snake to instantly kill the big bad that they spent months working on. God, what are they like, eh? So I was pretty surprised to see it in this game. Especially alongside the likes of like Fireball, Ice Storm, Turn Undead, all these crazy powers that are so OP, and you're just there like, bundle of sticks that is now asps. Go, asps! So basically, long story short, it is quite befuddling to see this here, especially when you use it against the Red Dragon in this game. That is top bant, the hardest boss in the game, which the game itself tells you multiple times. Do you want to face this boss? Are you sure about that? It's very difficult. Are you sure? And you go in, walk up to it and go, sticks to snakes! Number 2, Setting Off the Nuke, Warzone 2.0. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Jules, is actually pressing a button marked world-ending device really that much of a skill, seeing as a trained monkey and their lesser variant politicians actually have had access to do this? It doesn't take much skill at all, Jules. What do you want about, you fool? Well, to that I'd say, yeah, you're right. You are totally right. You are terrifyingly right that people have had that power. Yet trying to do so in Call of Duty Warzone 2.0, that is a skill indeed, my friend, and I'll detail how right now. Don't know why I did that. Because in order for you to irradiate your mates with your own smugness, you'll need to win 5 games back to back, which is about as likely as winning the lottery by never playing it for somebody with my skill level. Then the fun truly begins, as now you not only have to reach a new marker on the map where the bomb is, but also repair it with pieces scattered around the area. Only then can you flip the switch and end the match in supreme fashion, right? Well, wrong, because now you've got to defend the bomb, and the game has alerted every other player on the server to your location and where the bomb is. So you have to go through literal hell in order to unleash it on everyone else. If, and only if, you can survive all of this, will you be allowed to win the game in rather definitive fashion by wiping the entire play area off the map. Now that is a skill, and definitely a huge nuclear source of what energy? And number 1, Mayhem Mode, Resident Evil 4 Remake, Mercenaries Mode. So let's get this out of the way. Resident Evil 4's remake is bloody brilliant. Mercenaries Mode! It's stylish, it's got drum-skin-tight gameplay, and it is a title that has embraced what worked in the original while not being afraid to shave off some of the rougher edges. And while it was a little disappointing to hear that the Mercenaries mode wouldn't ship with the base game at launch, after running the game back-to-back, all it did was build anticipation for what was already one of my favourite modes ever to be introduced to the Resi series. And let me tell you, it bloody well delivers. It is so good. Dan, back me up. This is the arcade adrenaline rush that I have been itching for, and now with the ability to play as Luis, or Lewis if you are Leon's original voice actor from Resident Evil 4. Lewis! My good friend Lewis! He says it as he's dying.
Lewis! Lewis!
Anyway, back on track. It's only gotten better, but it's also gotten way more over the top thanks to the addition of Mayhem Mode, which takes the form of a bar that slowly fills up during playtime. Once you've earned a stock of this, you can unleash your character's special ability, and I gotta say, these f***ing rock. Leon gets super speed and better damage across the board with all of his weapons. Luis can drop dynamite that he doesn't take damage from, so can create huge traps. Hunk gets infinite bloody ammo. And Krauser? Well, my boy here goes to the extreme by unleashing his Las Plagas Swiss Army hands and turns into a one-hit kill machine. Seriously, when you hit that Stinger special move and see him slice through everything, including mini-bosses, in one hit, you will be left mouth agape with the word "what" dribbling from your bloody lips. Video games, no matter their subject, are experiences that can be boiled down to a conversation between player and the game itself. There's always a dialogue between the two parties of subtle encouragement. You see, even if a game is absolutely hammering your soul to the wall, the last thing a title actually wants you to do is stop playing. And so developers the world over spend hours of their time coming up with little tricks and secrets in order to tip the balance back into your favor. And as you can imagine, when you discover some of these, you'll be left reeling and saying the almighty word of what? So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 insane video game secrets that made you say what? Number 8. Multiplayer damage buffs. Gears of War. If there's one thing that video games pretty much have to adhere to when making an online multiplayer mode, it's that balance is king. If a certain class, weapon, or skill absolutely dominates everything else in the experience, then unfortunately that is what the player base will come to solely use. And therefore constant tweaking, testing, and nerfs need to be rolled out constantly to keep the field even. Or at least that's what they should do. It turns out that some titles fly in the face of fairness, as is the example of Gears of War, because it was revealed that players starting out on the game's multiplayer mode were actually given damage boosts at lower levels. And the reason for this was that, according to research done by the devs, players were unlikely to return for another match if they didn't get at least one kill in each game, and so in order to keep them engaged, these buffs would swing things in their favour enough to make an impact on both the game and their desire to keep playing. These buffs would drop off as they leveled up, yet this made for a strange case where the most powerful players statistically were those newest to the game. Number 7. Terrible AI by design. Left 4 Dead. If you were to ask gamers around the globe what their biggest pet peeves are within their favourite titles, the answers would likely centre around terrible enemy and partner AI, as if we're being honest, being lumped with a team containing the same brain power as a loaf of wet bread is like being sent right to gaming hell. But what if I were to tell you that sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes these brain-dead mates are actually terrible by design? It's a very strange thing to accept, but having nosedives in your team's ability to hit enemies is actually essential to gameplay flow. As if you rocked up only to have your squad take out all the enemies for you, then you'd feel like you were pretty superfluous. After all, this is your story, not theirs, and as such, these dips force you to become active. It doesn't stop the situation from being hilarious and making them look entirely incompetent, but this design choice is basically for our own benefit. Number 6. Big Daddy's taking a break. BioShock. When you're trapped hundreds of leagues below the sea in a violent, leaky, and completely broken society, there's a good chance that you're not going to be leaving the house without at least a few shotgun shells and your trusty wrench. However, if there's one way the almighty BioShock does mirror our real-life oceans, it's that there is always a bigger fish. And they don't get much bigger than the whopping Big Daddies, who will leave you wailing as they pierce through your blubber with those nasty-looking drills. It's made clear from the off that these enemies require planning and careful use of your environment in order to take down, as going toe-to-toe with them is akin to a death sentence. Their huge health pools, outstanding damage output, and the ability to run through you like a freight train mean that you're likely to be pegging it from these large lads as much as you are running into the firefight with them. It turns out, however, that the devs tried their best to make sure that you didn't get immediately pancaked by these rampaging Big Daddies, by reducing their speed considerably the first couple of times that you turn away from them in order to run. This means that even though they might be lunging for you at a frightening pace, you'll nearly always be able to escape or dive out of the way just in the nick of time. It's a brilliant mechanic that makes you feel like an absolute subnautical superhero, but that doesn't make it any less weird when you know what's going on behind the scenes. Number 5. Resident Evil plays hard. Resident Evil 4. I think it goes without saying, but Resident Evil 4 truly is one of the horror genre's all-time classics. The tongue-in-cheek tone, the wonderful enemy designs, and of course, Leon's funeral for a friend fringe are just absolute chef kiss. Completing this holy trinity of a title comes the outstanding gameplay, which not only shifted the action to an over-the-shoulder perspective, but also presented a brilliant bit of fine-tuning that many players wouldn't even notice. Now, whereas adaptive difficulty isn't exactly a new idea in the grand scheme of things, with titles like God Hand who promote this feature proudly on the box, Resident Evil, on the other hand, never makes mention of this feature at all. In a move that attempts to cater to players' skill without ever making them aware of it, Resi 4 scales its enemy aggressiveness, placement, item drops, and even damage dealt and received depending on how well the player is doing. If the person is struggling through with a tiny bit of health, then it's more likely that enemies will be slightly more docile to give them a chance to heal up or intentionally miss a shot in order to act as a wake-up call to their current situation. Inversely, if the player is carrying more guns than even the Matrix could load in and is more stocked up with more green than a pharmacy run by Snoop Dogg, enemies will be far more aggressive, even taking a few extra shots to drain their reserves and reset the scale. Clever, right? But also, what? Number 4. Percentages mean nothing. XCOM. So I'm not going to lie to you, this next entry is both personal and painful. When it comes to the XCOM series, the concept of what is fair is not something the game understands, or at very least does understand but chooses to ignore. You will see enemies pop up out of nowhere, blast your team to oblivion with superior weaponry, ambush your base, drain your resources, and otherwise make you look like an utter fool, to such an extent that if this franchise came with a developer's commentary soundtrack, it would just be them laughing at you hysterically for hours at a time. However, something much less funny are the so-called to-hit percentages that the game touts each and every time you take aim at little grey men and try to turn them into massive red mist. As while you might be told that you have a 100% chance to hit, the reality of the situation is much less certain. It turns out that according to the lead designers of XCOM 2, the percentages are mere guidelines that really don't reflect your statistical chances to hit, and in many cases are actually just inflated or deflated according to the difficulty that you're playing on. This means that it's very possible to miss a 100% chance to hit shot because the game actually reads it more as 90% to hit on harder settings. What? Indeed. Number 3, she's right behind you, PT. While we might never get to know what PT's actual full-fledged release might have looked like thanks to Konami fudging things up so badly with auteur video game director and certified cheeky whippet Hideo Kojima, the playable teaser still remains one of the purest and indeed most terrifying horror experiences we've yet played on consoles. The atmosphere is tense and heightened to breaking point by the tight claustrophobic corridors, and the endless repetition of walking the same halls over and over adds to the sense of paranoia and dread that hits you when you witness small changes in the environment. Oh, and then of course there's Lisa, who will grab you at some point and scare the living daylights out of you. Yet you know what makes this close and personal encounter all the scarier? The fact that she's right behind you all the bloody time. In order to give the player small glimpses of Lisa in reflections and to pipe breathing or creaking noises behind you, Lisa's graphical rig is planted right behind the player from the very start. And knowing that she's just there, hovering over your shoulder, well, it makes the experience all the more terrifying, right? Number 2, the rot is a hoax. Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is a mightily impressive game, isn't it? Not only does it look utterly fantastic, but it deals with pretty difficult subject matter, that of mental health and processing complex emotions in a rather interesting way. To add even more pressure to the trials that Senua faced, developer Ninja Theory pushed this concept of the rot really hard in the lead up to the game's release. The dark rot, according to the devs, was tied to a permadeath system within the game, and each time the player failed or died would spread up Senua's arms towards her head. If it was to ever reach our hero's head, then that would be it. Game over, save file deleted, you're done. Except you see, this was actually a big fib from Ninja Theory. At no point does the dark rot ever reach your head, and the player can die countless times without any true repercussions. It was merely designed as a motivating factor, and one to instill in players that they should never give up. It's a bit underhanded, but the intention of perseverance is admirable to say the least. And number 1, armor means nothing. Dark Souls 3. Okay, so to preface this section, armor does actually mean something when it comes to the Dark Souls 3 experience. However, it doesn't mean all that much. Confused? Well, this is just the opening of the rabbit hole, my friend. When it came to Dark Souls 3, From Software wanted to address an issue that had been plaguing the prior 2 titles in the series, namely that when it came to armor types, a few sets were just being used a lot more than others thanks to the buffs that they provided. And so they set about readdressing the system so that more sets would see a greater rotation. What they did, however, was make one of the most bizarre damage reduction systems going. Thanks to a huge number of YouTubers and data miners looking into the system, they found that not only did each armor type experience huge drop-offs in terms of actual damage prevented when its damage percentage reduction was over 25%, but that more alarmingly, each armor set actually provides the same flat damage reduction across the board. That's right, the real difference between a full Havel set and the painted Guardian robes is about one full swing. Instead, it's the player's vitality and other stats that boost the survivability rating up. Now, on the one hand, you can rejoice as you're not locked to specific sets anymore and can just fashion souls to your heart's content, but on the other, those looking to hide behind a wall of steel might actually be wasting their own time come the late game. And for those of you that are interested in a much greater and much more eloquent explanation of the stat breakdown, check out the video How Defense Works in Dark Souls 3. It is a real eye-opener for sure, and will definitely leave you saying, what? And there we go, my friends, those were 8 insane video game secrets that made you say, what? I hope that you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section below. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me over on Twitter at RetroJ with a 0, or you can swing by Live and Let's Dice. That's Dice with a C, where I do all of my streaming outside of work and also some Warhammer battle reports as well, if you're into that sort of thing. But before I go, I just want to say one thing. Hope you're treating yourself with love and respect, my friend. Treating yourself like the big ledge that I know you are, because you deserve the best things in life. Yes, you do, and do not let anything or anyone else tell you otherwise, alright? Go out there, smash it, prove what I already know, and that is that you are a big ledge. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.